Chapter 277. When he walked out of the secretariat, Li Mu sighed softly. Half a month ago, Lu Yi was so warm to him, calling him brotherly. Just now, in the secretariat, Lu Yi's attitude towards him had changed dramatically. Warmth became politeness, politeness with alienation, and within the alienation with vigilance. Obviously, after the incident with Cui Ming, the straight man image he had painstakingly built had collapsed. Before today, the courtiers at most thought that he was a bootlicker of the Empress. After today, they would guard against him as a cunning fox. Although a bootlicker would bite, a dog's brain was not as scheming. Foxes were different. In the eyes of most people, foxes were cunning, sinister, and treacherous. This was actually a stereotype of this race. There were foxes who were stupid. Xiao Bai almost had the words, stupid, white and sweet, written on his face. Once everyone's impression of him changed, no matter what he did, they would probably guess whether he had a deeper motive. When he walked out of the secretariat and passed by the palace gate, a sedan chair came from outside the palace. Out of the way, out of the way. The few sedan bearers who were carrying the palanquin berated Li Mu from afar to move aside. Li Mu looked left and right. The palace gate could allow at least 4 palanquins to pass through at the same time. He wondered who was inside the palanquin. When he walked out of the palace gate, he happened to hear a few guards talking. It's Princess Yunyang's sedan chair. The prince consort is in prison. The princess can't sit still anymore. The prince consort's character is so bad. The princess should just kick him away and let him fend for himself. Hearing Princess Yunyang's name, Li Mu looked back. The sedan chair had disappeared at the end of his line of sight. Judging from the direction, it should be going to the West Palace. The West Palace was occupied by the previous emperor's concubines. Although the great Zhou emperor had changed his surname after the empress ascended the throne, she did not purge the Shao royal family. She also did not make things difficult for the concubines left behind by the previous emperor. They were still allowed to live in the West Palace and were treated according to the etiquette of imperial concubines. When Mr. Mei mentioned Cui Ming and Princess Yunyang, his face was full of disdain. He looked down on the couple and thought that they were probably jackals of the same tribe. Regardless of whether it was Princess Yunyang, the Shao royal family, or the officials of the old party, they would certainly not watch Cui Ming fall from power. Princess Yunyang had entered the palace in such a hurry, she must have gone to the West Palace to plead for leniency. Li Mu left the palace and walked on the streets. The people on the streets were all talking about Cui Ming. Madame Chu had caused a huge commotion in the Hall of Punishments earlier, and those who saw the phenomenon couldn't help but ask about the reason behind it. You can't judge a book by its cover. Who would have thought that Prince Consort Cui, who looks like a dog, is actually a beast? I already knew that he wasn't a good person. Look at his face. His cheekbones are sunken and his eyebrows are high. One look and I can tell that he's a hypocritical and ruthless person. All the ladies in Fairy's capital are captivated by him. There must be something strange about him. The imperial court should just kill a beast like him. Don't let him harm the women of Fairy's capital anymore. He's always loitering on the streets. It's so annoying. None of these good-looking people are good. That's not all of them. Constable Li is also good-looking. Cui Ming isn't even fit to carry his shoes. Constable Li has sword-like eyebrows, starry eyes, and a round nose. One look and you can tell that he's an upright person. It's just that he's fated to be in love. What's so strange about that? If I were a woman, I'd want to marry him too. On the streets of Fairy's capital, butchers, waiters, and peddlers gathered in 2s and 3s. They all expressed their disdain for a beast like Cui Ming. They wanted nothing more than to tear him into pieces and send his soul to the 18th level of hell. In a rouge shop by the street, a few women who were choosing rouge were also discussing this matter. You can't judge a book by its cover. I didn't expect Prince Consort Cui to be this kind of person. To think that I like him so much. I even dreamt of him the day before yesterday. I didn't expect him to be such a beast. 2 young women sighed while choosing rouge. Their last companion snorted and said, no matter what Prince Consort Cui does, I'll still like him. He'll always be the prince consort in my heart. A woman frowned and said, how can you be like this? He killed his wife and dozens of her family for his future. How can you like someone like this? Do you still have any sense of right and wrong? The woman pouted and said, I just like him. So what? Is it against the law to like someone? I just saw the princess's sedan enter the palace. Princess, you must think of a way to save the prince consort. Save your grandma's leg. The owner of the rouge shop took the rouge she was looking at from her hand. He was so angry that the muscles on his face twitched and the veins on his forehead popped. He shouted, Get out. You're not welcome here. Get out. The woman was stunned for a moment. When she came back to her senses, she said angrily, You dare to scold me. The shopkeeper grabbed her arm and chased her out of the shop. He said angrily, Not only do I dare to scold you, I also dare to hit you. I'll remember your donkey face. From now on, you're not allowed to step into my shop. Otherwise, I'll hit you every time I see you. Seeing the shopkeeper raise his hand, the woman ran away. The other two women glanced at her and did not chase after her. Li Mu looked at the woman running away and sighed in his heart. There was no lack of people like this woman. Fortunately, there were only a few people like her. In the hearts of most people, justice still existed. The shopkeeper of this rouge shop was a kind person. Li Mu went into the shop and bought 2 boxes of rouge. It could be considered as taking care of his business. Xiaobai was a natural beauty. Even without makeup, she was still a peerless beauty. However, Li Mu felt that it was better for her to dress up. This way, she could reduce her charm and prevent him from having some messy dreams at night. Ever since the Empress had discovered that they slept together in the dream, she had never visited Li Mu's dream again. Li Mu had once asked Li Si this question. Of course, this was under the premise of concealing the Empress's identity. Li Si said that if a woman disregarded her identity and often went to meet a man at night, it was not because of love, but because of loneliness. Between Li Mu and the Empress, there was naturally no such thing as the former. But how could the Empress be lonely? Li Mu initially thought that Li Si was talking nonsense. However, the more he thought about it, the more he felt that what he said made sense. As the ruler of a country, the Empress was above millions of people. Because of her identity, status, and strength, the ruler of a country was often alone. They had no relatives or friends. The world only respected and feared them. In the long run, it was easy for their mentality to be suppressed to the point of perversion. Li Mu felt that the Empress was already a little inclined in this direction. In front of others, she was the noble Empress. She had to put on airs when she spoke. However, in Li Mu's dream, she was not polite at all to him. As someone who aspired to be the Empress's intimate little jacket, it was not enough to just help her solve her problems in the imperial court. He had to help her open her heart. There must be other ways besides letting her vent her feelings on him. Li Mu walked on the street, thinking about the Empress. He inadvertently glanced and saw a figure in front of him. It was a middle-aged man. He was not burly, but he was very tall and upright. His appearance was not as good as Cui Ming, but at least he was comparable to Tu Zhangchun's. Li Mu had investigated the Assistant Minister of Justice, Zhou Zhong, through Wang Wu. He did not have a wife or children. He lived in a house with 5 courtyards in the North Court. This house was bestowed by the previous emperor. Other than Zhou Zhong himself, there was only an old servant in the house. There were no other maids or servants. Li Mu did not understand why Zhou Zhong would join the old faction. His life was tight. Although the mansion he lived in was big, there were no maids or servants. Li Mu was sure that if Zhang Chun had that mansion, he would have to hire at least 8 maids, and all of them would have to be beautiful. The dragon slayer turned into an evil dragon because he coveted treasures and the princess. Zhou Zhong was not greedy for money, nor was he lustful. He did not use his power to oppress the common people. What was he after? Zhou Zhong suddenly turned around and asked, Lord Li, you have followed me for so long. Could it be that you want to show off to me that you have captured Assistant Minister Cui? Li Mu sneered. Lord Zhou, don't you know why Cui Ming was captured? Since Zhou Zhong's strength could control Madame Chu and affect her mind, he could also make Madame Chu go crazy in the court of the Ministry of Justice and use Cui Ming to get rid of her. However, he did not do so. Instead, he forced Madame Chu to break through. If Zhou Zhong did not have a grudge against Cui Ming, then there was a mole in the old faction. Zhou Zhong glanced at him and said, "The affairs of the court are not as you imagine. It is too early to talk about victory or defeat." Li Mu asked, "What do you mean?" Zhou Zhong said, "You will know by tomorrow at the latest." After saying this, he turned to leave. After taking 2 steps, he paused and turned back to say, "The Chu family's matter can be considered a wake-up call for the court. If you really want to serve the people wholeheartedly, you should propose to His Majesty to take back the right to kill the people in each county." Li Mu said, "Lord Zhou, you don't have to worry about this. I have just reported this matter to His Majesty. In the future, after the counties review the cases, the case files will be submitted to the Ministry of Justice for review. His Majesty will approve it and distribute it to the counties." Zhou Zhong nodded and said, "That is good." Li Mu thought of something. He looked at Zhou Zhong and asked, "If I remember correctly, Lord Zhou pushed for this law reform more than 10 years ago. Why was it abolished later?" Zhou Zhong said indifferently, "Because His Majesty found it troublesome." Li Mu cursed inwardly. Many of the decrees and laws of His Majesty's time were left to this day. The good great Zhou was ruined by His Majesty. Now that the world was taken over by His Majesty could only blame His Majesty. Thinking of His Majesty, Li Mu could not help but think of the Empress. He sighed and said, "Her Majesty is still the most brilliant." Zhou Zhong nodded in agreement and said, "Although loyal dogs are hard to come by, they must meet a wise ruler." Li Mu rejoiced and said, "Fortunately, I met Her Majesty." Then he realized something. He raised his head and said angrily, "Who are you calling a dog?" Chapter 278. Being a subject and being a loyal dog were 2 different things. Unfortunately, many people in this world didn't understand the difference between the 2. Heaven, earth, ruler, family, and teacher. In people's hearts, these 5 were people that they had to respect and obey. This concept had been deeply rooted in people's hearts since ancient times. People had to maintain respect for heaven and earth, be loyal to their ruler, love their country, be filial to their parents, and respect their teachers. These were all virtues, but being loyal to the ruler was for the sake of love. Love didn't necessarily mean being loyal to the ruler. When faced with an incapable ruler like the previous emperor, being loyal to the ruler was no different from bringing disaster to the country. For the sake of cultivation and to realize the value of justice in his heart, Li Mu was willing to do things for the Great Zhou court and the people of Great Zhou. However, this didn't mean that he would crawl at the feet of the Empress and be a loyal dog. The Empress might be high and mighty in the eyes of others, but in Li Mu's heart, she couldn't be majestic. When he thought of how she had ravaged him in his dreams, the majestic image he had painstakingly built for her collapsed in an instant. Li Mu couldn't see through Zhou Zhong, but he knew that over the years, as the assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice, he had shielded many people from the old party. However, he had also made incomparable contributions to perfecting the laws of Great Zhou. If one carefully read commentary on the laws of Zhou, they would discover that Zhou Zhong would amend or add a new section of the law every once in a while. In Wei Bin's case, according to the old laws, there was no doubt that his sentence would have been reduced. However, 2 years ago, Zhou Zhong had defined rape of more than 2 people as a serious case. Wei Peng's law of Great Zhou hadn't been updated in time, and by a freak combination of factors, he had successfully obtained the death penalty for Wei Bin. If one carefully studied commentary on the laws of Zhou, it was easy to discover one thing. In the past decade or so, Zhou Zhong hadn't touched on the interests of the nobles in Shen-du. Ever since the failure of the reform, he had never tried to abolish the penal code. Instead, he had used a silent method to promote the reform of the laws at the lower levels. If he hadn't revised the laws 2 years ago, Li Mu would have been able to see Wei Bin and the others in Shen-du a few years later. Human nature was complicated. It was hard to label someone like Zhou Zhong as a good or bad person. However, there was no doubt that he was a smart person. He would not have said those words to Li Mu for no reason. Regarding Cui Ming, it was still too early to talk about winning or losing. Li Mu pondered for a long time. He was certain that from the perspective of the law, Cui Ming would not be able to escape death unless the Empress protected him. Therefore, Princess Yunyang would definitely persuade the Empress Dowager or Consort Dowager to persuade the Empress. However, with the Empress's character, she would definitely not agree. After feeling sorry for the Empress for a while, he had already walked to the entrance of the Li residence. Li Mu pushed the door open and said, "Xiao Bai, come and see what I bought for you." Li Mu stepped through the door and stopped. Xiao Bai was squatting in the garden in front of the courtyard, holding a small shovel. Other than Xiao Bai, there was also a woman standing in the garden. Xiao Bai planted the flowers she had bought a few days ago and patted the soil with the small shovel. She asked, "Sister Zhou, when will these seeds bloom?" The Empress said softly, "Step aside." Xiao Bai took the shovel and walked out of the garden. When she saw Li Mu, she said happily, "Young master, you're back." Li Mu had just parted with the Empress at the palace. He had gone to the secretariat and chatted with Zhou Zhong on the street, which had taken up a lot of time. However, she had arrived home before Li Mu. It seemed that she had been at the Li residence for a while. The Empress glanced at him and said, "The palace will not be peaceful for the next 2 days. I came to your place to hide." Li Mu immediately understood what she meant. For Cui Ming's case, Princess Yunyang would definitely ask the Empress Dowager and Imperial Concubine Dowager for help. These people were the concubines of the former emperor and the elders of the Empress. If they lowered their status and pleaded for Cui Ming, the Empress would definitely be in a dilemma. Under such circumstances, it was not a bad idea to not see and not hear. Li Mu thought for a while and asked, "How long will your majesty be hiding here? Do you need me to clean up a room for you?" Xiao Bai put down the shovel and said with a smile, "I've talked to Sister Zhou. She will sleep with me tonight." Li Mu sighed. When would Xiao Bai become more vigilant? During the time when Li Mu returned from the palace, she had already treated the Empress as a sister. Human thoughts were complicated. For demons like her, who had grown up in the mountains and had never interacted with humans before, many of them were very naive. They were so naive that they gave people the impression that they lacked a brain. She and Bai Tingxin were both this type. Of course, the Empress was trustworthy. Li Mu was happy to see Xiao Bai build a good relationship with her. Xiao Bai still did not know that the Sister Zhou she spoke of was the richest woman in the Great Zhou. If she got closer to her, she might have a chance to grow 5 tails and 6 tails. What surprised Li Mu was that Xiao Bai was naive and ignorant. She did not have much respect for her status as the Empress. The Empress could actually put down her status and call a little fox sister. She really did not behave like an Empress at all. However, he soon realized that Li Si was probably right. She was powerful and had a high status, but she was also human. Humans would feel lonely. After becoming the Empress, she had no relatives, no friends, and even no enemies. For the sake of the throne, the Shao royal family had fought with the new party to the bitter end. However, what they were fighting for was the position of the next emperor. As the youngest transcendent expert in the Great Zhou dynasty, the Shao royal family would not dare to become her enemy. Li Mu sighed. As a person, she did not even have an enemy. No wonder she would feel lonely. Xiao Bai was silly because of this. When others knew the Empress's status, they would respect her and stay away from her. Xiao Bai was close to anyone who treated her well. This was the nature of the Heavenly Fox clan. As for Xiao Bai, because she was so beautiful that even women could not arouse the slightest jealousy, it was easy for her to capture the Empress's heart. Last time, the Empress gave her a few drops of Heavenly Fox blood essence, allowing her to advance to 4 tails. She remembered this kindness in her heart and probably forgot the task Lu Hanyan gave her. She automatically excluded the Empress from the ranks of fox spirits. While these thoughts flashed through Li Mu's mind, the Empress had already walked out of the garden. She stood outside the garden and gently waved her sleeves. Li Mu instantly felt that the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the courtyard suddenly became abundant. In the garden, the seeds that Xiao Bai had just planted sprouted and broke out of the ground. They grew rapidly at a speed visible to the naked eye. First, green leaves were born, and then buds were formed. In a short moment, the buds that had just formed buds were competing to bloom. In a few breaths of time, The garden in the Li residence was full of flowers. Li Mu marveled at the transcendent powerhouse's Taoist magic. Xiaobai was already dumbfounded. She grabbed the Empress's sleeve and said blankly, "Sister Zhou, I want to learn this." The Empress pinched her face and said, "When you grow another tail, I will teach you." Li Mu didn't tell Xiaobai that if she wanted to reach the Empress's level, she would have to grow another 3 tails and become a 7-tailed fox. Spring was a magical power that could be performed by a powerhouse in the creation realm. However, the cultivation of the 5th realm was only at the level of making the withered tree sprout. The Empress's Taoist magic that could make the withered tree bloom in a short period of time required at least the cultivation of the 7th realm. In the small courtyard, the fragrance of flowers filled the air. Xiaobai ran into the garden, sniffing and looking around. Li Mu remembered that there was no more food at home, and the matter of Cui Ming would probably not be resolved in a day or 2. In other words, the Empress would have to stay here for at least 2 days. He looked at the Empress and asked, "Your Majesty, what kind of food do you like to eat? I will go and buy it." The Empress said lightly, "I said, you don't have to call me that outside the palace." It seemed that she really didn't like being the Empress. After leaving the palace, she didn't even say, "Your Majesty." However, in this way, Li Mu was a little troubled about how to address her. If he called her Miss Zhou, it would seem distant, but if he called her Miss Xiao, it would be a little strange. Like Xiaobai, it didn't seem appropriate to call her sister Zhou either. Xiao Zhou, Xiao Xiao, or directly calling her by her full name would be even more inappropriate. Li Mu thought for a moment and asked, "What do you like to eat?" Since he didn't know how to address her, he might as well not address her and save himself the trouble. The Empress thought for a moment and said, "Fish, tofu." There were 3 people, so 4 dishes and 1 soup should be enough. Xiaobai liked to eat chicken, and the Empress liked to eat fish. Li Mu made steamed sea bass, Xiaobai's favorite stewed chicken with mushrooms, braised tofu, and casually stir-fried some vegetables. The last dish was the soup that Xiaobai spent 2 hours to meticulously brew. Without Mr. Mei and Shangguan Li, and with Xiaobai's liveliness, this meal was much more lively than the last time. Gradually, Li Mu also realized something. He could completely treat Zhou Yi of the Li residence and the Empress in the palace separately. The woman sitting opposite him now was not the monarch of a country. She was just an elder sister who had the same name as the Empress and whom Xiaobai had just met. At the dinner table in the Li residence, the atmosphere was harmonious. In a hall in the West Palace, Princess Yunyang knelt on the ground and begged, "Mother, please save the prince consort." Opposite her, a woman who looked to be about the same age as her and who also looked very similar to her slowly stood up. She said coldly, "Back then, I advised you that Cui Ming's status is not good enough for you, but you refused to listen to me. Now that he has caused trouble, you only know to come and beg me?" Princess Yunyang stepped forward, hugged her leg and said, "Mother, no matter what, he is still my prince consort. I have already lost 1 prince consort. Do you want me to lose another one?" She was her daughter after all. The woman sighed, helped her up and said, "Okay, I will put down my old face and beg His Majesty." Princess Yunyang stood up, wiped her tears and said happily, "I knew it. Mother is the best." A moment later, at the gate of Shangyang Palace. Looking at the woman in the palace dress walking slowly, Shangguan Li bowed and said, "Greetings, Imperial Dowager." The woman in the palace dress asked, "Is His Majesty in the palace? I have something to see His Majesty." Shangguan Li looked at the woman in the palace dress, shook her head and said, "Imperial Dowager, His Majesty is not in the palace." Chapter 279. West Palace, Yongshou Palace. The imperial concubine returned less than a minute after leaving the palace. Princess Yunyang hurried out and asked, "Mother, what did she say?" The imperial concubine said calmly, "She's not in the palace." Princess Yunyang's expression changed. She said flatly, "That's impossible. She's no longer a member of the Zhou family. If she's not in the palace, where else could she be?" The imperial concubine said calmly, "It's true that she's not in the palace. She probably predicted that you would ask me to beg her. Tomorrow, The imperial concubine temple will judge the prince consort according to the law. She doesn't want to see us. Princess Yunyang said anxiously, Mother, what should we do now? You have to help me think of a way. The imperial concubine thought for a while. She looked at her and asked, Do you really have to save him? Princess Yunyang nodded and said, No matter what, I have to save him. The imperial concubine thought for a long time and finally sighed. She walked into her bedroom and took out a wooden box from under her pillow. She opened the wooden box and handed a golden token to Princess Yunyang. She said, This token was given by the late emperor. I only have one. Take it to the imperial concubine temple tomorrow and give it to Prince Shou. He'll know what to do. Princess Yunyang asked suspiciously, This token can save the prince consort? The imperial concubine said, You just have to do as I say. Li residence. Li Mu put the tofu that the empress asked for into the boiling pot and sighed. Who would have thought that the empress of the Great Zhou, a seventh realm transcendent powerhouse, would not be in the palace but sit here and eat hot pot with them? Most of the food in the palace was exquisite. The special feature was that the quantity was small and the presentation was very particular. Of course, the taste was not bad. Needless to say, the culinary skills of the imperial chefs were top-notch. Those who could cook in the palace were all at the top of the industry. The palace cuisine used the best ingredients and had the most meticulous processing. Li Mu was fortunate enough to eat it twice, and it was really a pleasure. In comparison, hot pot was much simpler. Some simple vegetables were put in the pot and boiled. In terms of taste, it was naturally incomparable to the delicacies in the palace. However, when a few people gathered together, their faces flushed red from the heat, and they fought over a piece of cooked tofu. This kind of different atmosphere was something that could never be experienced in the palace. When she was eating in the palace, no one dared, and no one had the right to sit with her. Li Mu stole a glance at the empress. He couldn't help but wonder if the empress had a twin sister who looked just like her. The one in the palace was the empress, and the one outside was her sister. Li Mu scooped up a piece of meat for himself and said, Today, the Zongjing Temple's final trial of Cui Ming should be over soon. The empress put down her chopsticks and looked in the direction of the imperial clan temple. She counted with her fingers, and her beautiful eyebrows suddenly furrowed. Li Mu noticed her strange behavior and asked, What's wrong? The empress stood up and said, I'm going back to the palace. As soon as she finished speaking, her figure disappeared in front of Li Mu and Xiao Bai. Xiao Bai's mouth was stuffed with food, and she swallowed it with great difficulty. She exclaimed, Sister Zhou is so awesome. Li Mu patted her head and said, You eat first. I'll go to the palace. The empress originally planned to avoid the matter of Cui Ming here, but after only one night, she changed her mind. It seemed that something had happened at the imperial clan temple. Li Mu remembered Zhou Zhong's reminder, so he walked out of the house and went straight to the palace. At the imperial clan temple, the final trial of Cui Ming's case was held today at the imperial clan temple. Many officials gathered in the imperial clan temple to listen to the trial. King Shou looked at the old party members with a helpless expression and asked, The crimes committed by Prince Consort Cui are enough for him to die 100 times. Tell me, what should I do? If I kill him, he's one of us. If I don't kill him, I'll be bending the law for my own benefit. How am I going to explain it to His Majesty and the people? I'm so troubled. The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel asked, Is there still no news from the princess and the dowager? Someone said, The princess went to the palace yesterday to beg the dowager for help. I heard that the dowager went to see His Majesty, but His Majesty wasn't in the palace. He didn't return last night. His Majesty didn't return last night. If His Majesty didn't return to the palace, where else could he have gone? Could it be the Zhou family? Impossible, His Majesty has long lost contact with the Zhou family. He must be hiding from the dowager and the princess. It's obvious that His Majesty doesn't want to get involved in this matter. The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel coughed and said, Don't talk about His Majesty. The most important thing now is Assistant Minister Cui. King Shou waved his hand and said, I can't save him, but I can't not save him either. Who can tell me what I should do? Zhou Zhong said faintly, "We can't save Assistant Minister Cui. If we save him, it will implicate King Shou. Moreover, King Shou can only save him for a while. When the time comes, King Shou will be implicated and the Imperial Clan Temple will change hands. Assistant Minister Cui's case still needs to be retried, so let's not waste our efforts." King Shou said, "What Assistant Minister Zhou said makes sense. Why don't we just forget about it?" As soon as he said that, a Imperial Clan Temple official ran in and announced loudly, "Princess Yunyang has arrived." "Greetings, Princess." When Princess Yunyang walked in, everyone greeted her. Princess Yunyang bowed to King Shou and said, "Greetings, uncle. You may dispense with the formalities." King Shou waved his hand and said, "Have you found a way to save the prince consort?" Princess Yunyang nodded and said, "I found it." King Shou was stunned for a moment before he reacted. He said in disbelief, "You found it?" Princess Yunyang took out the golden token and said, "Uncle, please take a look." When he saw the golden token, King Shou realized something. He patted his head and said disappointedly, "How could I forget about this?" Princess Yunyang said in surprise, "Uncle, you don't seem too happy?" King Shou sighed and said, "I'm just blaming myself. If I had thought of this earlier, the prince consort wouldn't have to suffer so much." The imperial noble consort didn't tell her the use of the token. Princess Yunyang quickly asked, "Uncle, can this token really save the prince consort?" King Shou took the token and weighed it in his hand. He nodded and said, "This is a token that the late emperor ordered the Ministry of Works to make with meteoric iron in order to reward the important officials of the imperial court. The token is also plated with a layer of fine gold. The holder of this token will be exempted from the death penalty unless they commit treason. There are a total of 13 death exemption tokens. The imperial noble consort was very favored by the late emperor. It seems that the late emperor also gave her one." Someone asked, "Can the imperial noble consort's token save Assistant Minister Cui?" King Shou nodded and said, "As long as the imperial noble consort is willing, this token can save anyone." When the officials of the old party heard this, they were all delighted. The Assistant Minister of Personnel asked, "Can this token absolve Assistant Minister Cui of his crimes?" King Shou said, "It can, but it can't. Those who use the death exemption token will be stripped of their post and salary. This token can save his life, but he will no longer be the Assistant Minister of the Secretariat. He will only be the Prince Consort in name, but not in reality. The imperial court will have to take back his residence and no longer give him the salary of a Prince Consort." Cui Ming was the Assistant Minister of the Secretariat. This position allowed them to be the first to know about the state's affairs. They could control the imperial court through the decisions of the Secretariat. After the incident in Yang County, the Assistant Minister of Personnel used Cui Ming to order the imperial court to reward the evil spirit. Once he lost this position, the old party would lose a large part of their control over the imperial court. In other words, even if he could keep his life, he would be useless to the old party. The Assistant Minister of Personnel sighed and said, "This is already the best ending." Moments later, in the imperial clan estate, at the entrance of the prison, Zhang Chun blocked King Shou's path and shouted angrily, "What? You want to release Cui Ming? Cui Ming committed such a grave crime and you want to release him? Do you have no respect for the law?" King Shou held up the token and said, "This is the death exemption token granted by the late emperor. Those who hold this token will be exempted from the death penalty except for those who have committed treason. This is the law." Zhang Chun said loudly, "You are using the death exemption token from the late emperor. What are you doing to His Majesty?" King Shou snorted and said, "A ruler doesn't joke. The death exemption token represents the dignity of the imperial family and the Great Zhou. As long as the Great Zhou still exists, this token will be effective. Those who see this token will be the same as seeing the late emperor. Those who resist this token will be the same as resisting the imperial edict. Those who resist the edict will be executed and the three races will be exterminated." Zhang Chun stepped aside and extended his hand. "Please." When Li Mu arrived at the imperial clan office, he learned from Zhang Chun that Cui Ming had returned with Princess Yunyang. At the critical moment when the trial was about to begin, Princess Yunyang sent the death exemption token and exempted him from the death penalty. Although Cui Ming lost his position, the prince consort's residence, and his salary, he kept his life. At this moment, Li Mu finally understood the meaning of Zhou Zhong's words. It was impossible to say that everyone was equal before the law. The death exemption token granted by the late emperor was a privilege for these people. With the death exemption token, as long as they didn't rebel, they could be exempted from the death penalty even if they committed murder or arson. With the death exemption token, they could become an outlaw. This wasn't a special case in the Great Zhou. Li Mu knew that in the world he came from, this kind of thing happened a lot in history. However, the death exemption token in that world was called the Red Ink Iron Certificate. The holder of the Red Ink Iron Certificate could be exempted from the death penalty 9 times, and his descendants could be exempted from the death penalty 3 times. This was something that really happened in history. This, of course, destroyed the fairness of society and the fairness of the law. However, the law of this world was meant to serve a small number of people. In essence, the country was still governed by people and not by the law. Zhou Zhong proposed that the powerful were punished the same as the common people. Not only did he lose his position, but he also almost lost his life because the law protected the powerful, not the common people. Zhang Chun gritted his teeth and said, "There are 37 lives in the Chu family. A lousy token in exchange for 37 lives. This damn death exemption token, I heard it." Prince Shou walked out from the side and said, "You dare to say that the death exemption token granted by the late emperor is a lousy token?" Zhang Chun, I finally got something on you. What did I say just now? Zhang Chun looked at Li Mu and asked, "Li Mu, did you hear it?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "No." Zhang Chun looked at Prince Shou and said, "I didn't say anything. Your Highness, don't slander me." Prince Shou snorted at Zhang Chun and said, "I'm in a good mood today. I can't be bothered to argue with you." Zhang Chun gritted his teeth and said, "Don't be happy too early. I won't let that bastard Cui Ming go." King Shou shrugged and said with disdain, "What else can you do? Although a death exemption medallion can only be used once, do you have anything on Assistant Minister Cui? Can you prove that he was the one who framed the Zhejiang prefectural governor? If you can't prove it, then stop boasting in front of me." He glanced at Li Mu and Zhang Chun and said, "Let's go home and watch the opera." Chapter 280. The death exemption medallion can only be used once? Everyone can only be spared once? Li Mu and Zhang Chun looked at each other. They had obtained some important information from King Shou's words. The death exemption medallion was a one-time use item. Moreover, the same person could not be spared twice. This meant that if they found evidence of Cui Ming's crimes, even if Princess Yunyang could take out the death exemption medallion, she would not be able to pardon Cui Ming like this time. It had been more than a decade since the Zhejiang prefectural governor colluded with the devil sect. The chances of a witness surviving were very small. When Su He and Madame Chu died, Cui Ming had not yet started cultivating. This was why there was a possibility that the souls of Su He and Madame Chu still existed. After gaining the support of the Zhejiang prefectural governor, Cui Ming's cultivation would definitely increase greatly in a short time, just like Li Si. At that time, Cui Ming would be even more thorough. The Zhejiang prefectural governor's family would probably not even have their souls left. Using this clue to force Cui Ming to his death was very unlikely. However, Li Mu still had Su He. As long as she came out of seclusion, he could bring her to the divine capital and tell her about what happened back then. No one would be able to protect Cui Ming. Although Su He did not tell Li Mu about her, it was clear that Cui Ming was the first to get engaged to her. Then he gained the support of the Chu clan. Then he killed the entire Chu clan for the daughter of the Zhejiang prefectural governor. After that, he married Princess Yunyang. Li Mu looked at King Shou's departing figure. He had enough reason to suspect that Cui Ming's position in the old faction was really that high. Or was it just because he was handsome that all the men in the divine capital were jealous of him, even if they were his accomplices? This reason was no longer important. What was important was that Li Mu had to return to the northern county. He had planned to return to the northern county after Cui Ming was executed. Now that Cui Ming had been rescued, it was even more necessary for him to go there. After visiting Yu Hanyun and Wan Wan on Mount Baiyun, he still had to go to the Bay of Clearwater to wait for Su He to come out of seclusion. She had been in seclusion for nearly half a year. No matter how slow her advancement was, she should have come out of seclusion in the near future. Not everyone was as lucky as Xiao Yu and Madame Chu. On the path of cultivation, Su He had a much harder time. Perhaps it was because her resentment was different from Xiao Yu and Madame Chu. Before Xiao Yu died, she suffered a great injustice. She was able to ascend to the 5th level with her incantation that shook the heavens. Madame Chu's entire clan had been killed. In the past 20 years after her death, she had no other feelings in her heart other than hatred towards Cui Ming. As long as she could kill Cui Ming, she was even willing to let her soul dissipate. This was the biggest difference between Su He and Madame Chu. In Mrs. Chu's heart, there was only ruthless killing intent. However, the feeling that Su He gave Li Mu was that of a living person. She had joy and anger, resentment and worry, and she was also mischievous and mischievous. She often teased Li Mu until his face turned red. Although they had both died once, as spiritual bodies, Madame Chu lived for hatred while Su He lived for herself. Li Mu walked out of the Zongjing temple. He didn't go out of the palace. Instead, he walked towards Shangyang Palace. Before returning to the North County, he needed to inform the Empress. Nominally, he was the arrestor of the Luoyang government and the imperial censor of the palace. However, his most important identity was the Empress's internal guard. The Luoyang government and the censorate couldn't control him. Sheng Guanli stood outside the gate of Shangyang Palace. Li Mu walked over and said, "I have something to discuss with Her Majesty." Sheng Guanli turned and walked into the main hall. Soon she came out and said, "Let's go in." Li Mu walked into the main hall and found that Mr. Mei and Madame Chu were both there. Madame Chu's breath was extremely unstable. Obviously, she already knew that Cui Ming had been released. Li Mu walked to her and said, "I hope you don't blame Her Majesty. Her Majesty can't change the fact that Princess Yunyang took out the death-free golden medallion. Even the Empress couldn't do anything about the former Emperor's death-free golden medallion. Although her surname was Zhou and not Xiao, she still had to address the former Emperor as father. If she didn't acknowledge the former Emperor's death-free golden medallion, she would be unfilial. In history, there was once an emperor of the great Zhou dynasty who gave a golden whip to his important officials. Even the later emperors had to be wary of him. The emperors of a country were all people who wanted to leave their names in history. No one wanted to bear the name of being unfilial. Moreover, the emperor's promise was the country's promise in the eyes of everyone. Even if everyone thought that the death-free golden medallion was unreasonable, the imperial court had to abide by it since it existed. After Madame Chu calmed down, she said, "I don't dare to blame Her Majesty. Cui Ming killed my entire family. Even if my soul is destroyed, I will make Cui Ming pay with his life. Don't be impulsive." Li Mu looked at Madame Chu and said, "I will think of a way to deal with Cui Ming." It was obviously not a good idea for Madame Chu to go against Cui Ming. She had just advanced and her strength was not stable. Cui Ming had been in the creation realm for many years and was not weak. He probably had many trump cards. If she took revenge, she would just be courting death. At this moment, the Empress said calmly, "With Cui Ming's temperament, there is a high possibility that the incident with the Jiujiang County chief was framed by him. Unfortunately, too much time has passed and it is impossible to deduce. We can only search Cui Ming's soul." Li Mu hurriedly said, "Your Majesty, we can't make an exception." Everyone, including Li Mu, had their own privacy and secrets. If the imperial court made an exception, Pandora's box would be opened. This would have a worse impact than the death-free golden medallion and the silver law of guilt. There were no secrets between people. Everyone was selfless and didn't hide anything. They didn't commit any crimes. This sounded wonderful, but it was terrifying when one thought about it. Even when the government searched the souls of people, it had to be based on a large amount of evidence. If they could pry into people's minds based on guesses, the order of the world would be messed up. Li Mu hoped that Cui Ming would die, but he could not cross the line. He looked at the Empress and said, "Your Majesty, I want to go back to the North County." When Cui Ming was in Yangqiu County, the first woman he killed has turned into a ghost cultivator. We are friends. If we invite her, we can sentence Cui Ming to death. At that time, no one will be able to protect him. Madame Chu looked at Li Mu and finally understood why Li Mu wanted Cui Ming to die. She asked, "You know that girl?" Li Mu nodded and said, "She is my friend." Madame Chu sighed and said, "I have wronged her." Li Mu shook his head and said, "The person who killed her is Cui Ming. It has nothing to do with you." The Empress thought for a while and said, "You have offended many people in the Immortals' capital. I will let Mei Wei go with you." Li Mu shook his head and said, "No need. Even if there is an accident, I can protect myself." He had also reached the level of supernatural power. The power he could use was stronger than the mana of Madame Chu and Su He. With the help of various spells, he could close the gap between normal cultivators in the Destiny realm. If he counted in the talisman's treasure, he could fight with the cultivators in Dongxian for a while. Li Mu refused to be escorted, and the Empress did not insist. She said, "Remember to come back before the imperial examinations. I hope you can participate in the examinations this time." There were still 2 months before the examinations. No matter what, it was enough. The way to become an official in the Zhou dynasty had changed. The imperial examinations had become the stepping stone. If Li Mu wanted to play a bigger role in the court, he had to participate. As long as he could pass the examinations, no matter what the Empress arranged for him in the future, no one could object. After asking for leave from the Empress, Li Mu returned home. He packed his things with Little White and planned to leave as soon as possible. The news of Princess Yunyang using the death exemption medallion to save the prince consort had spread throughout the divine capital. When the people of the divine capital heard this, they fell into a long silence. In the play, Chen Shimi abandoned his wife and son, and in the end he was punished by the heavens. The audience was delighted. However, in reality, Prince Consort Cui killed his wife and exterminated his family. He bore the burden of dozens of lives, but he was still able to get away with it. As the prince consort, he enjoyed endless glory and wealth. A play was ultimately just a play. The Ministry of Justice. The director of the Ministry of Justice sat in the guardroom and sighed. "I didn't expect Princess Yunyang to have such a move. The death exemption medallion bestowed by the late emperor is probably something that even His Majesty can't object to. Whoever has the medallion has an extra life and can do whatever they want in the Zhou dynasty." As the director of the Ministry of Justice, although he would sometimes cover for people from the old faction, it was within the scope of the law. Assistant Minister Zhou once said that if the law was not fair to everyone, then the law would be meaningless. According to Assistant Minister Zhou, the death exemption medallion should not exist in the first place. The Assistant Minister's office. Zhou Zhong sat behind the desk and flipped open a book on the table. The book was blank. There was only a page in the middle that was densely filled with words. Upon closer inspection, one would realize that it was a list of names. There were 13 neatly written names on the paper. 3 of the names had been crossed out. Zhou Zhong picked up a pen and gently crossed out the words Imperial Noble Consort. Chapter 281. Li Mu packed up his things and waited for Xiao Bai in the courtyard. When he thought of Cui Ming's ending, he still felt some regret. In fact, he originally wanted to deal with Cui Ming himself without Su He doing anything. At that time, Su He would not have to come to Shindu and would not have to see Cui Ming. The incident from 20 years ago would also not cause her any harm. He did not expect that the great Zhou actually had something like a death exemption medallion. In order to punish Cui Ming, he had planned for half a month. He had written a script to create public opinion, and he had also coaxed and pestered the 6 officials of the Imperial Secretariat. After much difficulty, he finally sent Zhang Chun to the Imperial Clan Temple and successfully took down Cui Ming. In the end, he lost to a broken medallion. There were too many misdeeds left behind by the previous emperor. After one was dealt with, another one would appear. It was impossible to guard against it. If he lived for a few more decades, The Great Zhou would be destroyed by his hands sooner or later. A piece of scrap metal could destroy the justice of the law. It was the biggest stain on the Great Zhou's law and could not be tolerated. When he returned from the northern county, he would sooner or later turn those medallions into real scrap metal. Xiaobai walked out of the room with a small bag on her back. She happily said, "Benefactor, I'm done packing. Let's go." Li Mu looked at the bulging bag on her shoulder and said helplessly, "We're not moving. Why are you bringing this?" Xiaobai tightened the bag and said, "This is a gift for Sister Lu and Wanwan." Although the little fox was usually a little silly and dull, she was very considerate. Li Mu did not say anything else. He was about to leave when he suddenly thought of something. He asked Xiaobai, "When we return to the northern county, if Sister Lu asks you if I've been fooling around in Shindu, how will you answer?" Xiaobai said without hesitation, "Other than me, there are no other little fox spirits by your side." "Very good." Li Mu patted her head and said, "Let's go." Not being a womanizer was completely different from not having a woman by his side. In addition to Mr. Mei, Li Mu had close contact with her friends in the great music bar, including Miao Miao, Inin, Little 7, 16, and the Queen, who had come here twice for free meals. Although Li Mu had a clear conscience, he still wanted to give Xiaobai a heads up in advance so that she wouldn't stupidly shoot her mouth off and say something she shouldn't. Now, it seemed that the little girl was not as foolish as Li Mu had imagined. The two of them left the city and walked out of the no-fly zone outside the divine capital. Li Mu looked back at the distant divine capital and took out 2 high-level talismans. He handed one to Xiaobai and stuck the other to himself. In the next moment, the two of them flew into the air and disappeared into the horizon. He had many enemies in the divine capital. Since he dared to swagger out of the divine capital, he naturally had something to rely on. Lu Hanyan had asked Li Si to give him a thick stack of high-level talismans for escaping. Anyone with ulterior motives who wanted to follow them under the Dongxian wouldn't even be able to see their backs. Not long after the two of them disappeared on the main road, not far behind them, a cloaked figure lifted the bamboo hat on his head, and a look of shock appeared on his face. So fast! He looked up at the sky in front of him. In a few breaths, he could no longer see the two of them. Even if he used his fastest Dharma treasure, he couldn't match their speed. He stood in the same place for a while and had no choice but to turn back. Entering the fairy's capital again, he circled around a few streets before entering a mansion in the southern courtyard. After entering the mansion, he walked straight to the deepest courtyard. A short conversation could be heard from the courtyard. A moment later, the sound of tables and chairs being overturned, porcelain shattering, and a woman's hysterical cursing could be heard from the room in the courtyard. The princess residence. After returning from the imperial clan temple, the prince consort's residence had been searched. Everything in the prince consort's residence, including the residence, had been confiscated by the imperial court. Cui Ming could only stay in the princess residence. In a bedroom of the princess mansion, moaning sounds rose and fell one after another, continuous and unending. For hours later, Cui Ming walked out of the bedroom. When he pushed open the door, he could vaguely see the scene in the room. Cui Ming stood in the courtyard and adjusted his belt. A servant walked in from outside and bowed. Prince consort, Li Mu just left the divine capital. Cui Ming's face darkened when he heard Li Mu's name. He had used more than 20 years to climb step by step to the position of assistant minister of the secretariat. During this time, he had gone through countless hardships and setbacks and spent a lot of essence and blood to reach his current position. In one night, Li Mu had made him lose everything. This huge difference and turn had almost caused his mentality to completely collapse and give birth to an inner demon. Although he had suppressed it with great difficulty, he had also lost several years of cultivation, causing his realm to drop greatly. He had almost fallen from the creation realm to the transcendent realm. This matter would not only affect his future cultivation, but he could only wait until the Shao clan regained the throne if he wanted to make a comeback. All of this was because of Li Mu. He wanted to skin him alive, pull out his tendons, remove his bones, and refine his soul. However, in the divine capital, with his majesty protecting him, he had no chance to do so. Li Mu's departure from the divine capital was exactly what he wanted. Cui Ming asked, "Where did he go?" The servant said, "From the direction he left the city, it should be the North County." North County? Cui Ming's face darkened when he heard this. The North County meant a lot to him. The North County was his starting point. He had taken his first step in the North County and walked step by step to where he was today. However, the North County was also his final destination. Because of his carelessness in the North County more than 20 years ago, his 20 years of accumulation and hard work had gone to waste. Cui Ming muttered, "Li Mu is as cunning as a fox." Many people in the divine capital hate him to the bone and want him to die without a complete corpse. Why would he suddenly leave the divine capital and go to the North County? Could it be? Cui Ming suddenly woke up. Could it be that he wants to find Su-He? The moment he thought of this, his face turned completely gloomy. Madame Chu had already made him lose everything. If the fact that he had killed Su-He in order to climb up to the Chu clan was exposed, even the death exemption medallion would not be able to save his life. He could either leave the divine capital now, or Li Mu would leave the divine capital and never come back. He could let him and Su-He, who was very likely to become a ghost cultivator, stay in the North County together forever. Cui Ming asked in a low voice, "Has Elder Lu come back?" The servant shook his head and said, "No." Cui Ming was puzzled. He had sent Elder Lu to the North County to investigate Chu Yun and Su-He. It had been more than half a month and there was no news from him. As a fifth realm cultivator, as long as he left the divine capital and did not offend the 4 sects and 6 schools of Buddhism and Taoism, he could do whatever he wanted in any county. It was unlikely that anything had happened to him. However, if nothing had happened, why had there been no news at all for so many days? Cui Ming paced in the courtyard. After Elder Lu left, there was no one around him that he could use. However, Li Mu and Su-He were bound to die. If they did not die, Cui Ming would be the one to die. Cui Ming's expression changed for a while. Finally, he gritted his teeth and flipped his hand. A palm-sized bronze mirror appeared in his hand. He walked to the study and bit his fingertip. Using blood as ink, he wrote a few lines on the bronze mirror. Then, he put down the bronze mirror and crossed his hands. After forming a few seals, he sent his spirit energy into the bronze mirror. A white light flashed on the bronze mirror, and the blood-red words on it slowly disappeared, as if they were being swallowed by something. Imperial Palace. In the Imperial Garden. The garden was full of flowers. The Empress walked slowly among the flowers. Mr. Mei walked in from outside and said, "Your Majesty, Li Mu has left the divine capital." In the short time that he left, there were many movements in the southern and northern courtyards. Do we really not need to send people to protect him? The Empress smiled and said, "He's not as weak as you think. Even 1,000 illusion Shangren died in his hands. What can those people do to him? You've seen him bully others, but when have you seen others bully him?" Mr. Mei thought about it carefully and realized that it was true. Although Li Mu had offended many people, those who dared to bully him did not end up well. Being beaten with a cane was a light punishment. Those who were more serious would not be able to keep their heads. Those who were more serious would be chopped into ashes on the street. The prince consort of Princess Lianyang lost his official position and had his property confiscated. Many people in the court called him Her Majesty's little fox after betraying him. Mr. Mei recalled the process of meeting Li Mu. He spoke softly, was good-looking, liked to laugh, did things in a straightforward manner, was righteous, and did not want to compromise. Who would have thought that he was also full of tricks when he was up to no good? Thinking of this, she inadvertently glanced at the Empress. She saw a faint smile on the Empress's face. At that moment, the beauty of the Empress even overshadowed the flowers in the garden. Mr. Mei was dazed for a moment. Ever since she married the Crown Prince, she rarely saw such a smile on the Empress's face. Chapter 282. Chengdu. 20 years ago, the prince consort, Cui Ming, killed his wife and exiled her family. After Princess Yunyang took out the death exemption medallion bestowed by the late emperor, Cui Ming was released from the ancestral temple. The people's discussion gradually died down. The play, Qin Shimi, which was very popular in Chengdu, was also banned under the instructions of the old party. This play involved the prince consort, the princess, and even the old consort. It was suspected of insinuating and smearing the reputation of the royal family. All the major theaters were not allowed to perform this play anymore. Those who violated the rules would be punished according to the law. Ever since a few theaters were banned and closed down, Qin Shimi, which was popular for a while, was no longer sung in Chengdu. Although the people did not dare to say it out loud, they could not help but laugh in their hearts. What insinuating and smearing! It was all nonsense. Reality was worse than the play. In the play, Qin Shimi abandoned his wife and children and ended up dying a horrible death. Prince Consort Chui, who was a traitor, did all kinds of evil things. He was 1,000 times more hateful than Qin Shimi. In the end, he still got away with it and continued to be a relative of the royal family. Chui Ming's case came to an end. More major events were happening in Chengdu every day. After the reform of the imperial court's selection system, the first imperial examination became the most important thing. The talents recommended by the 36 counties gradually gathered in Chengdu. What happened a few days ago would soon be forgotten. North County. Baiyun Mountain. When Li Mu followed Yuzhen back to the mountain last time, the disciples of the ancestral court of Fulu School had already seen him. After Li Mu explained his intentions, 2 disciples personally brought him and Xiao Bai to Baiyun Mountain. The 4 of them landed on the square in front of the palace on Baiyun Mountain. Someone in the palace sensed them and 2 people walked out. One was an old man and the other was an old woman. The old woman on the right was called Hua Yangzi. She was the one who brought Li Mu and Lu Hanyan to tour the entire Baiyun Mountain. After greeting each other, the old woman looked at Li Mu with a surprised gaze. The last time he saw him, he had only just condensed his spirit. It had only been 2 months, but the aura on his body had already become extremely obscure. It was obvious that he had already stepped into the divine ability realm. For those with average aptitude, it would take 10 to 20 years or even longer to advance from astral focus to divine ability, but he only took 2 months. This kind of cultivation speed was simply terrifying. It was comparable to the top geniuses of the ancestral court. Although the speed of those geniuses entering the middle realm was fast, but that was because they had more than 10 years of accumulation. The last time she saw Li Mu, he was just an ordinary divine condensation cultivator. Without a doubt, he must have encountered a great opportunity in these 2 months. Everyone had their own fortuitous encounters. The old woman stopped thinking about it and said with a smile, "I'll take you to Junior Sister Lu's residence." On top of White Cloud Peak, there was a mountain with an abundance of heaven and earth spiritual energy. Most of the disciples on the mountain lived together. Only the elders and core disciples above the transcendent realm had the right to establish their own residence on the mountain. As the disciple of the first seat, Lu Hanyan's status was equal to that of the elders. The place where she lived was full of spiritual energy and beautiful scenery. It was a place that countless disciples and even many elders envied. At this moment, she was sitting at a stone table in the courtyard with one hand supporting her chin. She watched the flowing clouds leisurely float by in front of her eyes. White cranes flew among the clouds and cried out clearly. However, she was not in the mood to enjoy the scenery or cultivate. She was in a daze out of habit. The clouds floating by the distant mountain gradually transformed into the appearance of a person in her eyes. When she was young, she was sold to the music hall by her parents. She did not have enough to eat every day. She practiced the zither until she could not lift her arms. She gritted her teeth and endured it. Now, she could not bear to miss a person. In these 2 months, she wanted to go to the divine capital with Wan Wan to find Li Mu more than once, but she also resisted this idea more than once. For the first time in more than 10 years, she had found someone she could rely on, but she didn't want to completely rely on him. In order to have the ability to face some things with him, she had finally hardened her heart and made this decision. She absolutely couldn't give up halfway. That night, she watched him face a life and death crisis alone while she could only hide in a safe place. She did not want to experience it again. Wan Wan rested her chin on her hands and sat across from her. She muttered, I wonder how young master is doing in the immortal's capital. Is he eating well? Is he wearing good clothes? Is he living well? Is he being bullied? Those bad people in the immortal's capital love to bully people. Hearing Wanwan's words, Lu Hanyan could not help but worry. She had been in the divine capital for more than 10 years. She knew better than anyone what the divine capital was like. The imperial court there was dark, the officials were muddle-headed, the people were numb, and the children of the rich and powerful were lawless. If they committed crimes, they only needed to pay for it with silver. They did not need to be punished by the law. The students of the academy bullied women. Many women from good families were tainted by them. If she did not refuse to play the solo in the pavilion, she would not have been able to keep her innocence until today. With Li Mu's personality, he would definitely be at a disadvantage in a place like the divine capital. Thinking of this, Lu Hanyan could not help but worry even more. Wanwan shook her head and said, I wonder where the young master is. Does he know any pretty girls? Luckily, Xiaobai is by his side. Lu Hanyan was worried but also a little angry. She said, when did he lack pretty girls by his side? It's been so long and there's no news at all. Maybe he has already forgotten about us. Before she could finish her words, she suddenly let out an ouch. She felt something hit her head. Lu Hanyan turned around, but there was no one behind her. Wanwan looked behind Lu Hanyan. A strange light flashed in her limpid eyes. In the next moment, a look of surprise appeared on her little face. There was no one behind her, but Lu Hanyan was indeed attacked. Her expression changed slightly. She made a gesture with one hand and hit the empty space in front of her. He wanted to secretly appear beside her and give her a surprise, but he happened to hear her bad-mouthing him behind his back. He had kept his chastity for her for the past 2 months. Li Mu could not take it anymore. He lightly knocked on her head as a punishment. Facing Lu Hanyan's palm, he removed his concealment state and took the opportunity to hold her hand. He used all his mana to dissolve her attack. Li Mu interlocked his fingers with hers and said, You're so ruthless. Are you trying to kill your husband? Young master. Wanwan had already jumped up from the stool and ran happily to Li Mu's side. Lu Hanyan allowed Li Mu to hold her hand. Her clear eyes flashed with a blazing surprise. Then she snorted and said, It's been so long. You didn't even write a letter. Do you have other little foxes in Luoyang? Li Mu looked behind him and said, Xiaobai, testify for me. Xiaobai also removed her concealment state. She ran over and held Lu Hanyan's arm. She said, I can testify that you didn't fool around in Luoyang. Other than me, there are no other little foxes. Lu Hanyan pinched her face and said, You listened to him more than Wanwan. Did he teach you before he came? Xiaobai shook her head and said, I swear in the name of the divine fox. Young master really didn't fool around outside. The divine fox was Xiaobai's religion. Lu Hanyan obviously believed in Xiaobai's promise. She raised her eyebrows slightly and held Li Mu's hand tightly. She said, Come in. I have something to say to you. Li Mu said, I also have something to say to you. They walked into the room. The moment the door closed, the two bodies hugged tightly. Li Mu's longing that he had endured for 2 months suddenly exploded at this moment. This longing came not only from his heart, but also from his body. The body of pure yin and pure yang had a natural attraction. After tasting the sweetness of dual cultivation, he could no longer give up. The two kissed for a long time before their lips slowly parted. A faint blush appeared on Lu Hanyan's pretty face. She said, Let's go out. Wanwan and Xiaobai are still outside. Li Mu was a little reluctant to part with her. He hugged her soft body tighter and said, What are you afraid of? They are not outsiders. After being separated for so long, Lu Hanyan was even more reluctant to let go. She said softly, Then let's hug for a while more. The two hugged each other tightly and quietly listened to each other's heartbeat. They didn't say a word, but it was better than 1,000 words. Lu Hanyan was still a little shy. After a few minutes, she pulled Li Mu out. Xiaobai was taking out the gifts she brought from Shindu from a small bag and placing them on the table. This is a hairpin for Sister Wanwan. This is rouge for Sister Hanyan. This is the flower seed that benefactor and I bought in Chengdu. It will be beautiful after it blossoms. After distributing the gifts, she couldn't wait to plant the flowers in the flower bed outside with Wanwan. Wanwan watered the flower bed and asked, "When will these seeds bloom?" Xiaobai was stunned for a moment. Then she shook her head and said, "I don't know. When we were in Chengdu, Sister Zhou just waved her sleeves and they suddenly grew." Li Mu keenly sensed that his grip on his hand tightened. Lu Hanyan stood in front of the flower bed and looked at Xiaobai. She smiled and asked, "Which Sister Zhou?" Chapter 283. Xiaobai paused for a moment before saying, That's right. Li Mu took the initiative to say, "It's Her Majesty the Empress." This time, it was Lu Hanyan's turn to be stunned. She couldn't believe her ears and even forgot to be jealous. She asked, "What did you say?" Li Mu explained, "You also know that when I was in North County, I did some things that were beneficial to Her Majesty. After coming to Chengdu, Her Majesty valued me very much. One time, Her Majesty went on a private tour and happened to come to our house. Xiaobai met her at that time." At this moment, what he said to Lu Hanyan was the truth. However, he tactfully chose to hide the fact that he was ravaged by the Empress in his dream and was caught by her in his wet dream. Without waiting for her to ask in detail, Li Mu asked in return, "Don't tell me you suspect that I have some kind of ambiguous relationship with Her Majesty?" Lu Hanyan pinched his waist and said angrily, "Don't offend Her Majesty." Li Mu said, "It's okay. This is North County. She can't hear." Lu Hanyan stomped her feet. "That's still not okay." Li Mu said, "Okay, I won't say any more. I'll listen to you." The men of Great Zhou might not be convinced that a woman was the Empress, but Li Mu knew that many women in Great Zhou respected and worshipped the Empress. In addition to Shangguan Li, Lord Zhang's daughter also seemed to regard the Empress as her idol. He didn't expect that even Lu Hanyan would be so protective of her. If they knew that the Empress was not only dignified but also had an S side, the image in their hearts would probably immediately collapse. Hearing that Her Majesty took good care of Li Mu, Lu Hanyan was finally relieved. As for whether the two of them had any other relationship, she didn't have a trace of doubt at all. The Empress was the symbol of nobility, majesty, and holiness. As long as she had such thoughts, she felt that it was an unforgivable sin. After putting on the identity of the Empress, there was no need for Li Mu to explain who Big Sister Zhou was. He sized up Lu Hanyan with a glance and said in disbelief, "You have mystical powers so quickly?" A moment ago when Lu Hanyan attacked him, Li Mu discovered that her cultivation had already reached the middle realm. Li Mu himself had done countless good deeds in the divine capital. He had absorbed the willpower of countless commoners, spent countless spirit jades, and worked like a horse for the Empress. With her help, he had been able to upgrade his divine ability in 2 months. After arriving at Mount Baiyun, he realized that Lu Hanyan's improvement in the past 2 months was even greater than his. Lu Hanyan said with a little pride, "In the past 2 months, I have been cultivating well. Master has also helped me a lot in my cultivation." As she spoke, she looked at Li Mu and asked in confusion, "Why are you also upgrading so quickly?" After consuming a lot of the sect's resources and with the help of her master, she was able to advance a few days ago. She thought that when Li Mu came back and saw that her cultivation had surpassed his, he would be shocked. But what she didn't expect was that just like her, he had also advanced to the middle realm. Li Mu glanced at her and said, "Do you think you are the only one who has been cultivating well?" He actually said this with a little guilty conscience. In the past 2 months, he had only cared about fighting with the officials, the rich, and the old parties. Where would he find the time to cultivate hard? He had only used the time that others cultivated hard to take shortcuts. On the surface, he didn't seem to have guided qi cultivation, but the Empress was a 7th realm elite. Casually hugging her thigh for a while could save him years of hard cultivation. Lu Hanyan had hugged Yu Zhenzi's thigh, but the Empress's thigh was obviously longer and fairer than Yu Zhenzi's. Lu Hanyan said doubtfully, "That's impossible. Even if you didn't eat or drink for the past 2 months and absorbed the spiritual jades all the time, It's impossible for you to break through so quickly. You must be hiding something from me. After not seeing him for 3 days, she had a whole new level of respect for him. When it came to cultivation, Li Mu could easily fool Lu Hanyan in the past. After cultivating on Mount Baiyun for 2 months, the current Lu Hanyan was obviously not so gullible anymore. Li Mu said in amusement, "Actually, it's nothing much. I originally didn't want to break through so quickly. It was Her Majesty who helped me. Her Majesty is a 7th realm transcendent elite. She is as powerful as your sect master. This kind of thing is nothing to her." Lu Hanyan said in surprise, "Why is Her Majesty so good to you?" Li Mu said, "I exchanged all of this with my own hard work. You don't know, but in the past 2 months in Chengdu, I worked like a horse for Her Majesty. I gave my all and did so many things in exchange for such an opportunity." Lu Hanyan held his hand and said sympathetically, "It's been hard on you." "It's not hard at all." Li Mu shook his head and said, "Only when I become stronger can I have the ability to protect you. Although it's hard to work for Her Majesty is also very generous. She let me be an internal guard. Not only did she give me cultivation resources, but she also rewarded us with a 5-sectioned house. In the future, when you and Wanwan come back, you will have a big house to stay in." Lu Hanyan said in surprise, "A 5-sectioned house? Where is it?" Li Mu said, "The North Garden." Lu Hanyan was shocked. With her savings, she probably couldn't afford a 5-sectioned house in Chengdu, let alone the North Garden, where the high officials and nobles lived. Without a certain status, one couldn't afford a house in that kind of place even if they had the money. As if she realized something, Lu Hanyan looked at Li Mu and asked, "Her Majesty is so good to you. Are the things you did in Chengdu very dangerous?" Li Mu didn't want her to worry, so he smiled and said, "No, it's mainly because Her Majesty is generous to her own people. What I did was just some trivial things." Xiaobai looked at Lu Hanyan and said, "Sister Lu, do you and Sister Wanwan want to come back to Chengdu with us? Our house is very big and only my benefactor and I live in it." Lu Hanyan looked tempted, but she still shook her head and said, "Not now. Wait until my cultivation improves a bit more." Li Mu didn't say anything to Xiaobai this time. He had made too many enemies in Chengdu. With his current strength, he couldn't protect them very well, unless they were like Xiaobai and stayed at home all day. At the very least, he had to learn most of the supernatural powers of the supernatural realm and improve his strength by a large margin. He had to gain a firm foothold in Chengdu. Thinking of something, he looked at Lu Hanyan and said with a smile, "This time in Chengdu, I went to the great music bar and saw In, Miao Miao, Little 7, Little 16, and the others. They asked me a lot about you." Hearing about her former good sisters, Lu Hanyan looked excited and asked, "You saw them? How are they now?" Li Mu said, "They're doing very well now. It's just that you left without saying goodbye." Lu Hanyan lowered her head and whispered, "I didn't want to see everyone sad when we parted." Li Mu gently held her hand and said, "You'll see them when you go to Chengdu." Lu Hanyan looked at him and said seriously, "You have to take good care of them for me. Life in the great music bar isn't easy. They can't afford to offend anyone, and people often bully them. Little 7 and 16 are still young, so they don't dare to tell us when they're bullied." Li Mu patted her hand and said, "Don't worry, everyone in Chengdu knows that the great music bar is under my protection. Who dares to bully them?" Lu Hanyan tapped his forehead and said, "Don't try to show off. Chengdu isn't North County. There are many people we can't afford to offend there. You've only been there for 2 months, so you don't know much about Chengdu. Remember the people I'm talking about, they're the most arrogant and despotic children of officials. If you see them, you have to avoid them." Now, even their fathers and grandfathers had to think twice before meeting Li Mu, let alone the sons of the rich and powerful officials in Luoyang. Li Mu waved his hand and said, "No need." Lu Hanyan glared at him and said, "I'm serious, listen to me." Li Mu was helpless, but he could only nod. Lu Hanyan thought about it and said, "There are many playboys in Chengdu. You have to remember these people and avoid them. They are Zhu Tsong, the son of the director of the Ministry of Rights, Yang Xiu, the son of the director of the Ministry of Justice, Wei Peng, the son of the vice-director of the Ministry of Revenue, and the grandson of the minister of Taichung Temple, Li Mu shook his head and said, "They've been quite honest recently." Lu Hanyan looked at him and asked, "You know them?" Li Mu nodded and said, "I know them. These scum like to bully people. After I taught them a lesson, they became much more honest. They hide when they see me on the street." Lu Hanyan said in disbelief, "You taught them a lesson? They're the sons of officials. They don't need to be punished for breaking the law. They can pay for it with silver." Yang Xiu's father is the director of the Ministry of Justice. When they're in the Ministry of Justice, they can turn black into white, Li Mu explained. The Silver Act has been abolished. Back then, His Majesty wanted to abolish the Silver Act, but many officials objected. Later, I beat up their sons, grandsons, and so on, and then compensated them with silver. It was reasonable and legal. The director of the Ministry of Justice didn't punish me, so those officials took the initiative to ask for the abolition of the Silver Act. Actually, the director of the Ministry of Justice isn't that bad. Most of the time, he's very reasonable. Lu Hanyan was stunned and asked, "The silver law has been abolished?" Li Mu nodded and said, "It's been abolished a long time ago." Lu Hanyan was silent for a long time before she accepted this fact. She thought for a while and said, "There's also the students of the academy. The academy has a high status. The officials of the imperial court are all their students. Now, the students of the academy are morally corrupt. They often bully the musicians in the workshop. You can't have a conflict with them," Li Mu said. "A few days ago, little Seven was almost molested by a student of the academy. Later, I caught a few scum of the academy and chopped off their heads. Now, the students of the 3 academies are honest. In the future, the imperial court will no longer choose officials from the 4 academies. The academies monopolizing the imperial court has become history. Too many things had happened in the Luoyang in the past 2 months." Lu Hanyan couldn't come back to her senses. She was silent for a long time before she said, "There's another person who's more terrifying than the ones I just mentioned. He's called Zhou Chuchu. He's a member of the Zhou family and the empress's younger brother. He's arrogant and domineering in the Luoyang and won't shy away from any evil." Li Mu nodded and said, "This guy is indeed more arrogant than the others. Not only did he kill someone on the street, he even dared to threaten the victim's family. He's simply lawless. So, I simply struck him to death with a thunderbolt to prevent him from harming the people." Lu Hanyan stared blankly at Li Mu and asked, "Is this what you meant by a trivial matter?" Chapter 284. Although Lu Hanyan trusted Li Mu completely, she still could not believe what he had just said. Those hedonistic sons of rich families were tyrannical and lawless in Fairy's capital. Lu Hanyan had grown up hearing about their misdeeds. What exactly did these people go through to change their personalities in just 2 months? As long as she could remember, there had been a law of paying for crimes. Many officials had proposed to abolish it, but in the end, there had been no result. How could it be abolished so suddenly? The academy no longer had a transcendent status, and the young ruffian of the Zhou family, Zhou Chu, was dead. Were these all the trivial things he had done in the past 2 months? Lu Hanyan looked at Xiaobai and asked, "Is what he said true?" Xiaobai nodded and said, "It's true. The people of Luoyang like you very much. When we buy things on the street, they don't even take our money." After the shock, Lu Hanyan was only left with worry. She looked at Li Mu worriedly and asked, "You've offended so many people. Where will you go in Luoyang in the future? Why don't you quit being an official? We'll stay in Beijing. You can cultivate with me on Mount Bain." Li Mu smiled and said, "Don't worry. You know how many treasures I have. Besides, Her Majesty will protect me in Luoyang. It's the safest place in Great Zhou." Li Mu and Lu Hanyan did not walk the same path of cultivation. She had a master who was at the peak of Dongxian and had a pure Yin body like her. Lu Hanyan was destined to inherit the mantle of Yuzenzi. The resources of the ancestral court of Fulu school were at her disposal. However, Li Mu's cultivation depended on himself. The faith of the people was the foundation of his cultivation. Since he stood on the side of the people, He naturally had to stand on the opposite side of the privileged class. It was inevitable that he would offend people. Fortunately, he had the Empress and his own trump cards were not weak. Luoyang seemed dangerous, but it was also safe. After comforting Lu Hanyan for a while, she finally dispelled her worries. After 2 months of not seeing each other, Lu Hanyan had made rapid progress, and Wanwan was not bad either. Her cultivation had already reached the spirit condensation realm, and because of her Lingtong, her strength was far beyond the spirit condensation realm. Just now when Li Mu was invisible, Lu Hanyan didn't discover him, but he couldn't hide from Wanwan's eyes. If Wanwan were to advance to the middle realm one day, her spirit eyes would probably evolve as well. After not seeing each other for 2 months, Xiaobai had endless things to talk to them about. Seeing that it was getting late, Li Mu and Lu Hanyan looked at each other and understood what each other meant. The two of them stood up at the same time and said to the two girls, "It's getting late, you should rest early." After a while, the two of them sat cross-legged on the bed in Lu Hanyan's room. Their hands were clasped together, and mana flowed back and forth between their bodies through their hands. Traces of heaven and earth spiritual qi were attracted and quickly entered their bodies. After 2 months, Li Mu once again experienced the joy of duo cultivation. Cultivation was a boring thing, but duo cultivation of yin and yang brought a special sense of pleasure to both the body and the soul. This might be the reason why they were addicted to duo cultivation. The next day, the two of them didn't wake up until late in the morning. After that, Li Mu rode on his sword to Qingxian Peak. After being notified by the disciples guarding the peak, Hanja quickly walked out of the Taoist palace of Qingxian Peak. He strode over and patted Li Mu on the shoulder and asked, "How was Luoyang?" Li Mu smiled, "It was fine." He looked around and didn't see the figure that often followed behind Hanja. He asked, "Where's junior sister Qin?" Speaking of junior sister Qin, Hanja looked helpless and said, "She didn't cultivate properly and always followed behind me. I asked her to go into seclusion. She's not allowed to come out until she reaches spirit concentration." As he spoke, he suddenly looked at Li Mu with a strange look and found that he couldn't see through him at all. The last time they met, the two of them were spirit concentration. Now, in Hanja's eyes, Li Mu was just like an ordinary person. Naturally, his cultivation couldn't have regressed. The only explanation was that Li Mu's cultivation had far surpassed his. Hanja probed, "You have divine power?" Li Mu didn't deny it and nodded slightly. Hanja was stunned for a long time before he gritted his teeth and said, "Freak, I thought junior sister Li was fast enough. I didn't expect you to be even faster." Li Mu was silent for a moment. His lips moved, but before he spoke, Hanja said, "I know what you want to ask. Junior sister Li isn't here. I've kept an eye out for you. She hasn't returned to the sect in the past 2 months. If you really want to see her, maybe you can come back in 4 months. In 4 months, it will be the triennial peak competition. Junior sister Li's strength is one of the best in Purple Cloud Peak. She should be back to support Purple Cloud Peak." After chatting with Hanjo for a while, he went to supervise junior sister Qin's cultivation. Li Mu returned to White Cloud Peak again. Lu Hanyan was watering the flowers that Wanwan and Xiaobai planted yesterday. She asked, "Did you see your friend?" Li Mu nodded and said, "Yes." Lu Hanyan asked again, "Did you see Miss Li?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "I didn't go to Purple Cloud Peak. When I was talking to Hanja about her, he said she wasn't in the sect." In front of Lu Hanyan, Li Mu didn't deliberately hide anything. Their relationship was only 1 step away. If he hid it too much, it would show that he was guilty. It was better to be honest. Li Mu didn't continue this topic. He asked, "Hanja said that in 4 months, there will be a grand competition in the sect. Will you participate?" Lu Hanyan shook her head and said, "I don't think so. That's a competition for the younger generation. What would I do there?" Li Mu almost forgot that Lu Hanyan's status was equal to the elders of the various peaks. With her strength, it would be a bit of a bully for her to participate in such a competition. The grand competition's requirements were for young disciples under the age of 25. At this age, those who could reach the spirit convergence realm were already outstanding. Those who could reach the divine power realm were already top geniuses. They either had great talent or incomparable perseverance. There weren't many people like this in the ancestral court of Fu Lu school. Although talent was very important on the path of cultivation, it was very difficult to become strong with talent alone without hard work and the accumulation of years of cultivation. Although it was rare for young people to reach the spirit convergence realm, it wasn't that they didn't exist. However, the fifth realm cultivators Li Mu had seen were mostly middle-aged or old. Xiao Yu's situation was special. The youngest creation realm cultivator he had seen was Shangguan Li. However, she was 5 or 6 years older than Li Mu. If she hadn't been by the Empress side all year round, it would have been impossible for her to become a strong cultivator so early. The Empress wanted him to return to the divine capital before the imperial examinations. There were still 2 months before the examinations. Including the preparation time, there was plenty of time. Li Mu planned to stay in the North County for a few more days to accompany them. He stayed in Bayan Mountain for 3 days and then went to the county city with Lu Hanyan. After leaving the North County city, Lu Hanyan handed the Yunyan Pavilion to Zhang Shan to manage. He didn't make a name for himself as a constable, but he was very talented in business. He didn't let down Lu Hanyan's trust. The Yunyan Pavilion's business was getting better day by day. Zhang Shan was so busy that he lost a lot of weight. However, he was more energetic and his eyes were shining. Li Mu didn't lack cultivation resources now. He spent some effort to guide him into the path of cultivation and gave him some Fulu and Dharma treasures to protect himself. Although he didn't have to do dangerous jobs anymore, he could still cultivate to protect himself. At the very least, he could strengthen his body and prolong his life. In the county city, Li Mu accompanied Lu Hanyan for 3 more days. He originally wanted to drink with the White Demon King and see his 2 nieces. However, he only saw the Green Bull Demon. From him, he learned that after Madame Bai came out of the ice coffin, the White Demon King and his family went out to play and hadn't returned yet. Li Mu was able to return to the county city. In the end, he returned to Yangqiu County with Lu Hanyan. This was the place where they knew each other. It was also the place where Li Mu had lived the longest when he first came to this world. In these few days, the 2 of them cherished this reunion very much. They were together for almost 24 hours every day. The progress of their relationship was only 1 step away. Li Mu wasn't in a hurry. For a woman, this matter was sacred and had a sense of ceremony. It had to be left until the night of the wedding. Their original plan was to leave this day for the day of their breakthrough. They would use each other's primordial yang and primordial yin to break through to the middle realm. However, no one expected that Lu Hanyan would enter the Fulu school and Li Mu would meet the Empress. The 2 of them had already broken through to the God Power realm. They definitely couldn't wait until the next breakthrough. On the 2nd day after returning to Yangqiu County, Li Mu left the city and went to Clearwater Bay. This time, other than returning to the northern region to see Lu Hanyan and Wanwan, he also had an important mission. That was to bring Su He back to the divine capital and send Cui Ming on his way. After leaving the city, Li Mu flew on his sword and arrived at Clearwater Bay in an instant. Landing in front of the familiar hut, Li Mu was stunned as he looked at the surroundings. The illusion that Su He had set up was gone. The house by the shore had collapsed. The surrounding trees were crooked and some had even been uprooted. More importantly, the deep pool that originally existed here had dried up. The altar at the bottom of the pool was still there, but it was almost destroyed. The female corpse on the altar was also gone. Li Mu's face was gloomy as he searched the surroundings. Not only did he not find Su He's presence, but he also didn't find the 2 female ghosts. He only found the reason why the pool where the altar was located had dried up. For some unknown reason, the river that flowed through the Gulf of Clearwater suddenly changed its course 2 li before it passed through the Gulf of Clearwater, bypassing the Gulf of Clearwater. In this way, without the suppression of the water vein, the formation on the altar at the bottom of the sea would immediately lose its effect. Unable to trap the female corpse underwater, Li Mu looked around and saw the mess by the shore of Clearwater Bay. Could this be caused by the battle between the female corpse and Su He after she escaped? Although they were of the same origin, one was a soul and the other was a physical body. They both wanted to devour each other's consciousness to reach perfection. When the two appeared at the same time, a great battle was unavoidable. Li Mu carefully thought about it and relaxed a little. After refining part of Thousand Illusions' soul force, Su He's strength was much stronger than that of the spirit corpse. If she stayed in the array, she would have a chance to retain her consciousness. Once she left the altar, she would be killed by Su He and her body would be taken over. Li Mu didn't have to worry about Su He at all. What he cared about now was where Su He had gone. Chapter 285. At the shore of the Bay of Jade. Li Mu carefully examined the traces in the surroundings and confirmed that they were the result of a battle. The river that flowed through the Bay of Jade had also changed its course because the fierce battle had shattered the cliffs and blocked the original channel, causing the altar at the Bay of Jade to lose its water supply. Gradually, Li Mu discovered a few more problems. According to his initial deduction, the change in the river's course should have caused the altar's formation to weaken, allowing the spiritual corpse at the bottom to break out of the formation and engage in a great battle with Su He. However, after careful examination, Li Mu felt that there should have been two experts above the 5th level fighting here. They had shattered the cliffs and forced the river to change its course, causing the female corpse at the bottom to break out of the formation. One of the 5th level experts had to be Su He, so who could the other be? The possibility of it being a passing expert was not high. Many cultivators like to kill ghosts and demons indiscriminately. However, even cultivators who wanted to slay demons and protect the Tao would consider their own strength. They would definitely not fight with experts of the same level. If they fought with experts of similar strength, both sides would often be injured. Cultivation was not easy. No one wanted to be injured and cause their cultivation to drop, unless their target was Su He. Who could have such a deep grudge against her? The answer was already obvious. Cui Ming. If Li Mu could think of Su He, how could Cui Ming not think of it? After luckily escaping Madame Chu's calamity, he would definitely want to cut the weeds and eliminate all threats to him. Suddenly, Li Mu felt all the hairs on his body stand on end as a great sense of danger arose. He abruptly turned around and looked behind him. Behind him was a messy forest. A few trees had been overturned and those that were still standing on the ground were also swaying left and right. For some reason, this forest gave him an incomparably strange feeling. However, no matter whether he used his heaven's eye or opened his eyes, he could not see anything strange about this forest. Li Mu's eyes flashed slightly. He turned his back to the forest and slowly walked towards the dried-up pool. The sound of wind breaking came from behind him. A branch from a poplar tree closest to Li Mu suddenly shot out and stabbed at Li Mu's back. The speed of the branch was unbelievably fast. Li Mu subconsciously dodged and avoided it, but his arm was still stabbed. After the branch pierced Li Mu's arm, it directly collapsed. However, there was no wound on Li Mu's arm, nor was there any blood. Bang! On the other hand, a strange sound suddenly came from the trunk of the poplar tree. Wood chips flew everywhere, and a large hole appeared on the trunk. The wholeness formula was a substitution technique. After Li Mu advanced to a divine ability, he could already master it. This technique could divert a portion of fatal damage. For such an attack, it could divert all of it. After the first attack failed, more branches madly grew out of the poplar tree and attacked Li Mu at lightning speed. Li Mu unsheathed Bai and faced the attacking branches. There was a sound similar to metal clashing. Bai slashed at the branches, but only left a shallow mark. He did not expect the branches to be so tough. They were not inferior to magic items. Li Mu had never seen such a divine ability. A green light flashed in his hand and Bai disappeared. The Qingxian sword was in his hand. Li Mu raised his sword and slashed at the branches. This time, the branches attacking him were easily chopped off like tofu. Soon, only the bare trunk of the poplar tree was left. In the next moment, Li Mu suddenly felt his legs tighten. He looked down and realized that his legs were entangled by two vines that extended from the ground. He waved the Qingxian sword and two green lights flashed. Two thick vines were cut off by the Qingxian sword. Li Mu held the Qingxian sword in his hand and looked around. He realized that in a short period of time he was surrounded by the shadows of trees. The trees in the forest surrounded him in layers. They were constantly changing their positions, implying some kind of formation. If they were allowed to form a formation, it would be very difficult for him to break the formation. Moreover, the person behind the scenes had not shown himself yet. Li Mu did not think too much. He took out a fulu and threw it into the air. Rumble! In the sky, the sound of thunder was loud. A huge purple thunder net came down from the sky. When the trees around Li Mu came into contact with the purple lightning net, they immediately turned into black ashes. Only a thick willow tree remained standing in its original place. A human face appeared on the willow tree. It was the face of an old man. He was staring at Li Mu with a horrified look. Green liquid flowed out from the corner of his mouth. This cultivator in the magical state, the strength of his Dharma treasure, the strength of his fulu, and the strangeness of his supernatural powers were completely beyond his imagination. He, who was seriously injured, wanted to take the opportunity to sneak attack this human cultivator and devour his essence, blood and soul to recover from his injuries. He did not expect to be at a disadvantage in such a short period of time. Not only did his injuries not recover, they even worsened. Everything in this trip to the North region was beyond his expectations. First, he found out that the soul of the woman that the prince consort asked him to find was still there. Moreover, she had already become a fifth realm ghost cultivator. Even though she had just entered the fifth realm, he suffered a lot. In the end, just as he was about to use his powerful spiritual power to heavily injure the female ghost and kill her, something happened. Their battle destroyed a cliff, and the collapsed cliff caused the river to stop flowing. After that, a female corpse flew out of the pool. That female corpse looked exactly the same as the female ghost. Although she was only at the peak of the fourth realm, she was only one step away from the fifth realm. After the female corpse appeared, she first attacked the female ghost. He wanted to sit back and enjoy the fruits of her labor. He did not expect that the two would team up to deal with him. Although he was strong, he could not take on the combined forces of the corpse and ghost. After heavily injuring them, they escaped. He could not chase after them, so he could only stay here and recover. Today, he finally saw a human cultivator and wanted to devour him to recover. He did not expect this person's strength to be beyond his imagination. Instead, it brought him trouble. Fifth realm tree demon. Li Mu's face was gloomy. He looked at the face on the willow tree and said, "Cui Ming sent you. Where is Su He?" This person pointed out Prince Consort Cui. The old man's expression changed and he immediately understood. Prince Consort Cui's guess was right. Someone wanted to use the female ghost to cause trouble. Since that was the case, he could not let him go so easily. The willow tree changed and turned into a skinny old man. His feet were rooted to the ground. Branches and vines quickly drilled out of the ground and surrounded the forest Li Mu was in. Countless branches and vines shot toward Li Mu from all directions. Although Li Mu had a treasured armor to protect him, it mainly defended against spells. Even the treasured armor could not completely protect him from physical attacks that had no blind spots. Li Mu formed a seal with one hand and silently chanted a spell. The Qingxian sword turned into thousands of sword shadows and surrounded his body. They scattered in all directions. Wherever the sword light passed, the vines and branches were all destroyed. The old man's body trembled and he grunted. He spat out green liquid again. Li Mu looked at him and asked coldly, "Speak. Where is Su He?" The old man's aura withered again and his face was filled with shock. After the short battle just now, he was almost certain that even if he was at his peak, he might not be a match for this Abhijina cultivator. Moreover, he had only recovered less than 30% of his strength. If he continued to fight, he might really die here. He did not continue to fight and quickly fled into the depths of the forest. Su He's whereabouts were unknown. Li Mu naturally would not let this tree demon go. He stuck a spirit travel talisman on himself and chased into the depths of the forest. The injured tree demon was frantically fleeing. Compared to the prince consort's safety, he cared more about his own life. In the 100 years of cultivation, he had experienced many dangers. However, after entering the 5th realm, he had never been chased by a 4th realm cultivator. He had also never seen such a powerful 4th realm cultivator. Fortunately, this was his home ground. It was not difficult to shake off the cultivator behind him. As he fled, he turned back to take a look. This glance made his soul leave his body. He saw that the human cultivator's speed was even faster than his. In the process of chasing, the human cultivator was constantly closing the distance between them. He would probably catch up to him soon. The tree demon was shocked. He did not dare to be careless and released his abhijna with all his might. Wherever he passed, trees grew rapidly. The branches overlapped and completely sealed off his escape route. Li Mu's pursuit was blocked. He simply flew into the air above the forest. Looking down from above, the lush forest seemed to have become a hole. Suddenly, it became quiet. There were no longer any strange movements in the forest. The tree demon had clearly concealed his aura and completely blended into the forest. No matter how Li Mu used his heavenly eye or opened his eyes, he could not discover him. 5th realm demons could conceal their demonic aura. The demon's seeking talisman would not be of much use. He could be sure that the tree demon was still in the forest. However, he did not know where exactly he was. Li Mu's body descended slowly. He began to search the forest carefully. The forest was extremely quiet. It was so quiet that he could only hear his own footsteps. After a long time, his search was fruitless. Li Mu looked around. After confirming that there was no danger, he turned his back to a huge tree and rested for a short while. A human face gradually appeared on the tree behind him. A withered claw reached out silently from the tree trunk. Then, with lightning speed, it grabbed towards Li Mu's back. There was no time to react at such a short distance. The withered claw immediately made contact with Li Mu's body. However, it did not pierce through Li Mu's body as the tree demon had expected. It grabbed his heart and crushed it viciously. The claw was extremely fast. The moment it made contact with Li Mu's body, it seemed to have collided with an iron wall. With a crack, it directly snapped. Li Mu quickly turned around. He grabbed the wrist of the withered claw and stuck a fulu on it. He said indifferently, "Freeze." The withered claw remained in its extended position. The human face on the huge tree also became stunned. Chapter 286. Taking advantage of the moment when the tree demon was immobilized by the body-securing talisman, Li Mu stretched out his hand. A chain appeared in his hand and he tied it to the tree. After the tree in front of him was bound by the chain, it gradually transformed into a skinny old man with a chain around his neck. This was a torture tool specially made by the imperial court. It was used to capture demons and spirits, and it was always successful. The cultivation of the demons and spirits that were locked up would also be sealed. This 5th realm tree demon was now just an ordinary old man. Fortunately, he was heavily injured and probably had not even recovered 30% of his strength. Otherwise, even though Li Mu was not afraid of him in a head-on battle, it was almost impossible to capture him alive. Li Mu took away the body-securing talisman and the old man gradually regained his consciousness. Feeling the cold chain around his neck and the sealed mana in his body, his expression changed drastically. He wanted to escape but was gently pulled back by Li Mu. Li Mu looked at the old man and asked the question he was most concerned about: "Where did Su-He go?" The old man glanced at Li Mu but did not speak. Li Mu took out a fulu and waved it in front of the old man. He asked, "Do you know what this is?" The old man looked at the purple heaven thunder talisman in his hand and could not help but swallow his saliva. Li Mu asked, "Guess, how many bolts of lightning can you withstand now?" The old man lowered his head and his face was extremely pale. Li Mu kept the purple heaven thunder talisman and took out a few more. He said, "Other than the purple heaven thunder talisman, I have a few more good things here. This is a sword talisman. It will destroy your demon body with one strike and your demon soul with the second strike. This sword is a heaven-grade divine weapon. It will not be a waste for you to die under this sword." The old man trembled and hurriedly said, "They escaped. The female ghost and the female corpse escaped. Li Mu was able to sense the emotions of this tree demon, so the possibility of him lying was not high. This made Li Mu feel a little relieved. If something really happened to Su He in the hands of this old demon, then even if he chopped him into pieces and burned him as firewood, it would still not be enough to appease the hatred in his heart. Li Mu's face was calm as he looked at the old man and said, "Speak, what happened at the Bay of Clear Water? If there is even half a lie, don't blame me for chopping you into pieces and burning you for firewood." The tree demon's life was in the hands of others, so he didn't dare to hide anything. He recounted everything that had happened in the Bay of Clear Water. He had been ordered by Cui Ming to come to North County to look for Madame Chu and Su He. He had searched the entire Yangqiu County with his ghost-seeking technique, but he couldn't find Madame Chu. Instead, he found Su He, who had just come out of seclusion. One demon and one ghost, a great battle broke out at that time. He had been in the 5th level for a long time, and Su He's cultivation was not as profound as his. However, their battle later on shattered the cliff, causing the Bay of Clear Water to stop flowing, releasing the female corpse from the bottom of the water. At first, the female corpse attacked Su He, but soon, the two came to an agreement and began to attack the tree demon. The tree demon was fighting 1 against 2, so he wasn't strong enough. He used a secret technique to heavily injure them, forcing Su He and the female corpse to retreat. However, he was also heavily injured and could only recuperate in the Bay of Clear Water. Until he met Li Mu looked at him coldly and asked, "Did Cui Ming send you?" The old man lowered his head, neither admitting nor denying. Li Mu fixed him in place again and sent him into the flask space. The flask space was a small space created by experts above the level of transcendence. It was attached to the real world and could be used to store things and hide people. In ancient times, some almighty experts would even create a spacious space for themselves to live in. Li Mu's ring had a very small space, equivalent to a small house, but it was enough to store the tree demon. The most important thing now was to find Su He. Although the tree demon was here and Su He was no longer needed to provide a witness, she was injured by the tree demon and the female corpse was spying on her. Li Mu was still worried about her safety. However, the north region was so big and there were no clues. Where should he go to find her? After thinking for a while, he decided to go to the county office and ask. If there was no news from the county office, then he would go to the county office. With a heavy heart, Li Mu walked out of the Bay of Clear Water. At a certain moment, he sensed something and looked to the side. In the next moment, he flew into a dense forest on the left. "Save me!" In the forest, a girl was carrying a bamboo basket with some freshly picked mushrooms. At this moment, the girl was being forced into a corner by several gray wolves. Her face was filled with panic. A gray wolf grinned, revealing its white teeth, and pounced at the girl. The bamboo basket in the girl's hand fell. She curled up into a ball and closed her eyes in despair. However, after waiting for a long time, nothing terrible happened to her. She carefully opened her eyes and saw a figure standing in front of her. The gray wolves were lying motionless on the ground. They were clearly dead. Seeing this scene, the girl was stunned for a moment. She quickly got up from the ground and said, "Thank you for saving my life, young master." It was just a few wild wolves. Li Mu could kill them with a wave of his hand. He bent down and helped the girl pick up the mushrooms on the ground. He put them into the basket and handed it back to her. "Are you okay?" The girl shook her head and said, "I'm fine." She took a step forward and was about to take the basket when her foot suddenly twisted and she almost fell. Li Mu quickly reached out to support her. When he approached the girl, he smelled a faint fragrance on her body. He could not help but sniff a few more times. The girl noticed Li Mu's actions and blushed. Li Mu coughed and asked, "Are you injured?" The girl looked down and a trace of pain appeared on her face. "I think I twisted my ankle." Li Mu thought for a moment and said, "I'm a cultivator. If you don't mind, I can treat you." The girl said, "My life was saved by young master. How would I dare to mind? I'll leave my injury to young master. I'm sorry for offending you." Li Mu bent down. His hand glowed with golden light as he gently held the girl's slender ankle. A strange numbness came from her ankle, causing her to blush even more. Soon, Li Mu withdrew his hand, stood up and said, "Miss, you can try again." The girl nodded and tried to walk a few steps. She said in surprise, "It doesn't hurt anymore." "Young master, you're amazing." Li Mu smiled and said, "This mountain is not safe. Where is your home? I'll send you back." The girl said, "My home is in the village at the foot of the mountain. I'll have to trouble young master." Li Mu smiled again and said, "It's no trouble. Let's go." The girl carried the basket and walked side by side with Li Mu. She curiously asked, "Young master, are you a cultivator? I heard that our northern county has a Fulu school. The cultivators there are all very powerful. Are you a disciple of the Fulu school?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "I'm only a mountain cultivator. I don't have the qualifications to be a disciple of the Fulu school." The girl smiled and said, "Young master, you're too humble. You're so skilled to be able to kill those hungry wolves so easily and heal my injuries. Young master, you must not be an ordinary cultivator." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "Just a few hungry wolves. If young master is willing, you can easily get rid of them." The girl was stunned and shook her head. "Young master, you're joking. I don't even have the strength to truss up a chicken. If I'm not as powerful as young master, how can I deal with those hungry wolves?" Li Mu looked at her and smiled. "What's so powerful about dealing with a few hungry wolves? I can't compare to young master who can steal the sky and fake the sun." The girl looked at Li Mu and was slightly stunned. She said in shock, "Young master, what are you talking about?" Li Mu said coldly, "You vixen, how long are you going to pretend for?" The woman stared straight at Li Mu. The panic on her face gradually calmed down, but she still asked with some surprise, "How did you see through it?" "With your cultivation, it's impossible for you to see through my true form," Li Mu said. "Do I need to see? I can smell your scent from far away." The girl's expression changed. She asked in embarrassment and anger, "What scent do I have?" Li Mu said, "Fragrance." The girl's fragrance was one that Li Mu had never smelled before. It was not the fragrance of flowers or herbs. It was a unique body fragrance. When he was in the divine capital, Li Mu smelled this body fragrance every night when he fell asleep. How could he not know that she was from the heavenly fox clan like Xiaobai? Even though there was a huge difference in the fragrance coming from the two of them, Li Mu was certain that there was no mistaking it. The girl's expression softened. She looked around and said, "I don't believe that you can guess that there's something wrong with me just by the fragrance." Li Mu pointed at the colorful mushrooms in her bamboo basket and said, "If you want to pretend to be a little girl picking mushrooms, please be more professional. Who would go to the mountains to pick poisonous mushrooms?" Chapter 287. After being exposed by Li Mu, that woman simply did not continue acting anymore. She threw away the bamboo basket, curled her lips, and said, "What kind of lousy forest is this? Even the mushrooms here are poisonous." Li Mu's expression had completely darkened. He kept a distance from the fox demon and asked sternly, "How dare you, demon? You pretended to be a human woman and lured me here. What do you want?" Li Mu could not see through the fox demon's cultivation. The demon aura emitted from her body was very strong. She was at least in the five-tailed realm. Seducing men and absorbing yang qi were common tricks used by the three-tailed fox spirit. The five-tailed fox spirit was already comparable to a human fifth-realm cultivator. The effects of human yang qi, blood, and soul on their cultivation were negligible. The woman smiled seductively and said, "Someone asked me to kill you. Look at your handsome face and soft skin. I can't bear to do it. How about this? If you join the Meizong sect, I won't kill you. I can also report back." Hearing the name Meizong sect, Li Mu's expression changed slightly. Like the corpse sect of the Thousand Illusions Venerable and the soul sect of the Netherghost Saint, the Meizong sect was also one of the 10 sects of the demonic path. It was said that the people of the Meizong sect were all handsome men and beautiful women. They were all good at seduction. It was an important organization used by the demonic path to collect and inquire about information. Li Mu's enemies were all in Fairy's capital. who in Fairy's capital was colluding with the demonic path to be able to hire the assassins of the Meizong sect. Cui Ming, Zhou Ting, the assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel, the minister of the Ministry of Revenue, Li Mu counted and found that he had offended too many people. There was no way to determine who was the mastermind unless he asked the fox in front of him. Then he looked at the woman in front of him and asked, "Who asked you to kill me?" The woman shook her head gently and said regretfully, "I can't tell you this unless you go back with me," Li Mu said. "Then let's see if you have the ability." The woman smiled charmingly and said, "Then I'll let you see my abilities." As she smiled, Li Mu's mind wavered. However, he had been tested by Xiao Bai for a long time and quickly regained his composure. After silently reciting the clear heart mantra, the fox demon's seduction technique was completely useless against him. Her charm failed, and the woman said in surprise, "No wonder you're so bold. You do have some skills." 2 short swords appeared in her hands. She smiled and said, "Since you're not willing, then I'll beat you until you're willing." As soon as she finished speaking, her figure disappeared before Li Mu's eyes. He immediately used the fighting word incantation and his body instinctively lifted his sword to block. He fought with the fox demon who wielded a short sword. The 2 short swords in her hands were obviously not ordinary weapons. They were able to clash head-on with the Qingxian sword without any damage. Not only that, but her close combat ability was also very outstanding. Her movements were nimble and extremely fast. If it wasn't for the battle character art, Li Mu would definitely not be her match in close combat. Li Mu was shocked, but the fox demon was even more shocked. Although her attacks were swift and fierce, Li Mu's defense was equally shocking. No matter which direction she attacked from, he could easily block it. It gave her a feeling that he was airtight and flawless. Not only that, he was only a transcendent realm cultivator, but the dermic power in his body seemed to be inexhaustible. After activating a heaven-class dermic artifact for such a long time, his dermic power did not seem to be depleted at all. It was very strange. Although Li Mu would not be at a disadvantage in close combat with the fox demon, it would be difficult for him to gain the upper hand. Therefore, he took the initiative to retreat and threw out a few fulu. The purple heaven thunder talisman and sword talisman came out together. The fox demon made a hand seal and a dermic power shield appeared around her body. Neither the purple heaven thunder talisman nor the sword talisman could break through her defense. Li Mu used the 1,000 sword shadows again, but she still managed to block it. Although he had entered the transcendent realm, Li Mu's dermic power was still not comparable to a 5th realm cultivator. Even if he used all his strength, he could only fight to a draw with a 5th realm cultivator. For a 4th realm cultivator, this was already an unbelievable battle power. But no matter what, he still could not defeat the fox demon in front of him. Li Mu, on the other hand, had a winning move. He still had a heaven-grade talisman that could summon a golden armored soldier that could easily suppress this demon. However, that talisman could only be used once. Using it on her was tantamount to using a cannon to kill a mosquito, or using a sledgehammer to kill a chicken. He had wasted a life-saving trump card in vain. The fox demon stood in the distance and looked at Li Mu as if she was looking at a treasure. She said, "I admit that I have underestimated you. If you join the Meizong sect, I will tell you who wants to kill you." Li Mu ignored her. His mind moved again and the Qingxian sword flew out from his hand. It turned into a ray of light and shot towards the fox demon. The fox demon threw out 2 short swords and fought with the Qingxian sword in the air. She smiled at Li Mu and said, "It's no use. You are no match for me." Whoosh! Just as she finished speaking, a ray of golden light shot out from Li Mu's hand and flew in front of her in an instant. The golden light turned into a golden rope, and before the fox demon had time to react, it tied her up tightly. The moment she was tied up by the rope, the fox demon could no longer use her dermic power. Clang! Without the control of their master, the 2 short swords fell from the air and landed on the ground with a crisp sound. The fox demon's expression changed. She struggled a few times but found that the rope was getting tighter and tighter. She felt pain and stopped struggling immediately. Li Mu kept the Qingxian sword and clapped his hands. He walked over from afar and said, Stop struggling. This is the immortal binding rope. You are a five-tailed fox demon. You will not be able to break free. The more you struggle, the tighter it will be. The fox demon glared at Li Mu and said, "How can you be a hero when you ambush me in the dark?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "I did not say that I am a hero." The Empress had not given him this thing to be a hero in the first place. Although the speed of this immortal binding lock was fast, it was very easy to dodge when it was used to bind someone head-on. It would only be effective when it caught the enemy off guard. This fox was still not cautious enough. Li Mu walked in front of her and said, "Tell me, who sent you to kill me?" The woman looked at him coldly and said, "You better let me go right now." Li Mu made a series of hand seals, and the rope around her body drew closer and closer. She didn't know if the rope was intentional or not, but it wrapped around her chest. As it tightened, the originally magnificent rope was quickly twisted out of shape. The woman's face showed a trace of pain. She looked at Li Mu with even more anger. Li Mu stood in front of her and felt a little awkward. There was something wrong with the position of the rope. When the rope was tightened, it would act on her body and deform a certain part of her body. It made her look like a pervert with some kind of evil taste. Li Mu loosened the rope a little. He thought for a while and picked up a rattan from the ground. He pointed at the woman with the rattan and said, "Are you going to tell me or not? If not, I will whip you." The woman gritted her teeth and said, "Don't you dare." Li Mu used the rattan as a whip and whipped her. He said expressionlessly, "Tell me." The woman had lost her composure. She was ashamed and angry. She said loudly, "I will definitely kill you." Li Mu whipped her a few more times. The more he whipped her, the easier it became. He could even feel the joy of the Empress. Although this fox demon was not bad-looking, she wanted to take his life. There was no such thing as being protective of the fairer sex. Li Mu wanted to know who was behind her and then return to Shendu to take his life. This was truly colluding with the demon sect. In the Great Zhou, it was a serious crime that could lead to the extermination of an entire family. The woman's face was full of shame and anger. The rattan was imbued with mana. When it hit her body, it hurt. However, the pain on her body was not worth mentioning compared to the humiliation in her heart. She stared fixedly at Li Mu. Her originally clear and bright eyes seemed to be filled with flames of fury. "There's no use looking at me like that." Li Mu said, "Tell me who ordered you. As long as you are obedient, you will suffer less physical pain." The woman took a deep breath. The anger in her eyes was gradually extinguished. She said calmly, "My name is Phantom Princess. Remember my name. I will return today's humiliation 100-fold." With that, she grabbed a piece of jade hanging from her waist and crushed it. In the next moment, her figure disappeared before Li Mu's eyes. The immortal binding lock lost its target and shrunk rapidly. Finally, it shrunk into a ball and fell to the ground. A spatial Dharma treasure. Li Mu was shocked to see the fox demon escape before his eyes. He did not expect the fox demon to have such a Dharma treasure. Just like the flask Dharma treasure, this spatial Dharma treasure had the ability to teleport. It could only be made by a 7th realm cultivator. It could teleport someone thousands of miles away. Li Mu searched the surroundings for a long time but could not find the fox demon's aura. In the end, he could only walk back. He picked up the 2 short swords that she did not have time to retrieve and put them into his ring. Then, he flew in the direction of the county. Chapter 288. Jiujiang County. 100,000 Mountains. In a hidden palace in the mountain, after a spatial ripple, Phantom Princess's figure appeared out of thin air. A few figures sitting cross-legged in the palace slowly opened their eyes. A stooped old man asked, "Who actually forced you to use a teleportation talisman?" Lord Heavenly Lord also refined one of this talisman. "Could it be that you encountered a 6th realm cultivator?" A despicable human cultivator. Phantom Princess's beautiful face was filled with anger. "How dare he do this to me? The next time I meet him, I'll make him wish he was dead." She did not say that the person who had forced her to use her life-saving trump card was just a minor cultivator in the transcendent realm. She had lost to a Realm 4 cultivator and even lost her weapon. This was an extremely embarrassing matter. Even now, she still didn't understand how a 4th realm cultivator with magical powers could have so many strange magical powers, magical weapons that were impossible to defend against, and high-level talismans that he didn't feel the slightest bit of heartache when he threw them away. She walked out of the palace and the people outside bowed. "Greetings, Lord Phantom Princess." Phantom Princess's face darkened. "Tell Cui Ming that the mission failed. Tell him to pray for himself, North County." When Li Mu walked into Yangqiu County, he still could not figure out who had asked the Devil's Doctrine to hunt him down from afar. Cui Ming and Zhou Ting were the most likely culprits. After all, he killed Zhou Ting's son and caused Cui Ming to lose his position. He also caused him to be searched. The purpose of returning to North County was to send him on his way as soon as possible. Unfortunately, the fox demon got away. If it wasn't her chest that was tied up but her hand, this wouldn't have happened. It was this indecent talisman that was to blame. But then again, that fox demon's teleportation talisman was really heaven-defying. As long as he crushed it when he was in danger, he could immediately escape. It was more effective than any offensive or defensive talisman. When he returned to the fairies' capital this time, he had to ask His Majesty indirectly if he could get one for himself. What made him helpless was that he already had a lot of enemies. Now, there was another level 5 fox demon. The heavenly fox race was very stubborn about revenge. For a gentleman, 10 years wasn't too late. For a fox, 100 years wasn't too long. Not only were they vengeful, but they were also very patient. In order to take revenge, they could suffer hardships that ordinary people could not. They could endure pain that ordinary people could not endure. Often, fox demons would go undercover by their enemy's side in order to take revenge. They would follow them for decades just to find an opportunity to take revenge. One could only be a thief for 1,000 days, but not a thief for 1,000 days. If he had the chance to see her again, he was afraid that he would ruthlessly destroy her and eliminate her completely. After returning home, Lu Hanyan stood in the courtyard and asked, "Where did you go?" Lu Hanyan already knew of Su He's existence. Li Mu didn't hide it and said, "I went to find Miss Su. This time, I'm going back to the northern county to bring her back to the divine capital to testify and let the imperial court punish Prince Cui Ming." Lu Hanyan glanced at him and said, "So you didn't come to see me and Wanwan?" Li Mu looked at Xiao Bai and said, "Xiao Bai, help me testify. Did we go to White Cloud Mountain to find them as soon as we arrived in the northern county?" Xiao Bai ran over and nodded seriously. She said, "As soon as we came back, we went to find Sister Lu and Wanwan." After she finished speaking, she seemed to have noticed something and sniffed. Then she glanced at Li Mu and silently lowered her head. Lu Hanyan explained, but Li Mu found that ever since he came back, Xiao Bai had been acting very strange. She seemed a bit disappointed and would occasionally glance at him. When Li Mu noticed this, she quickly lowered her head. After dinner, Li Mu came to her room and asked, "What happened?" Xiao Bai lowered her head and said, "Benefactor, you have another little vixen by your side. Don't you like me anymore?" Li Mu was stunned for a while before he understood what she meant. He didn't expect Xiao Bai's perception to be so sharp. She even knew that Li Mu had come into contact with another vixen. Just now, besides fighting, Li Mu had helped her up when she fell. In order to test her, he had deliberately touched her fox feet. Li Mu didn't mention this matter. Lu Hanyan and Wanwan didn't know, but Xiao Bai sensed it. He smiled and explained, "There's no other vixen. When I came back, I fought with a vixen who wanted to kill me. It wasn't easy to catch her, but she ran away." He patted Xiao Bai's head and said, "Don't worry, I can only have you by my side." After hearing this, Xiao Bai's face lit up with joy again. Then she was a little worried and asked, "Is that vixen powerful? Are you hurt?" Li Mu nodded and said, "She's very powerful. She's a 5-tailed vixen. She should also be a descendant of the celestial fox. I don't know if she will come to me for revenge in the future," Xiao Bai said firmly. "I will work hard to cultivate and become powerful as soon as possible. If she comes to you for revenge, I will protect you. Li Mu reached out and pinched her face, saying, "Stay at home and don't think too much. I still have something to do and have to go out. By the way, don't tell Sister Lu about this. Don't make her worry." Xiao Bai said obediently, "Go ahead, benefactor. I will keep the secret." After comforting Xiao Bai, Li Mu left home and went to the county government. In the Yangqiu county government, Constable Zhou saw Li Mu and said in surprise, "Li Mu, why are you back?" "I heard from Zhang Shan that you went to Chengdu." Li Mu smiled and said, "I have some business to attend to, so I need to go back to the North County." Constable Zhou sighed and said, "Although the salary in Chengdu is high, it's not easy to survive. How you doing there?" "Not bad." Li Mu exchanged a few words with him and asked, "You haven't been back for 2 months. How did the Gulf of Clearwater become like that? Does Constable Zhou know what happened?" Constable Zhou said, "I don't know the details. It said that 2 masters fought at the Gulf of Clearwater and affected the water in Yangqiu County." Li Mu asked, "Does the county government know where the master of the fight went?" Constable Zhou shook his head and said, "I don't know." Li Mu regretted it. He missed his wife so much that after returning to the North County, he went straight to Baiyun Mountain and didn't find Su He first. Although the battle between her and the tree demon had already happened at that time, it hadn't been that long. Perhaps he could still follow some traces and find her. However, it had been quite a few days since the battle, and there were no traces of her at all. There was no way to find her. Since he didn't get any useful information from the county government, Li Mu used a high-level teleport talisman and went to the county government as fast as he could. In the past, it took him more than half a day to go from Yangqiu County to the county government. Now that his cultivation had increased, it took him less than an hour with the help of the high-level teleport talisman. After Commandery Officer Shin's cultivation increased, he left the North County. Li Mu wasn't familiar with the new Commandery officer, so he went to find Constable Zhao directly. 2 days ago, Li Mu had just treated them to a meal in the county capital. Constable Zhao saw him and said with a smile, "We'll be going to the county government soon. Do you want a drink tonight?" "Not today." Li Mu shook his head and said, "I came to find you this time because there's an important matter." Hearing Li Mu's words, Constable Zhao's expression became more serious and he said, "What is it? Tell me." Li Mu said, "There was a battle between 2 masters in Yangqiu County and it affected the water." Constable Zhao, "Do you know?" Constable Zhao nodded and said, "I know. I personally handled this matter. From the traces at the scene, it was at least a battle between 2 fifth realm cultivators. Moreover, it was very likely that they were a ghost and a demon. Fortunately, the place where they fought was desolate and uninhabited. No one was injured." Li Mu asked, "Does the county government know where the ghost cultivator went?" Constable Zhao shook his head and said, "I don't know about that." Li Mu looked disappointed. At this moment, Constable Zhao continued, "However, a strange thing happened in Yu County these 2 days. Could it be related to this?" Li Mu immediately asked, "What strange thing?" Constable Zhao said, 2 days ago, a thick fog rose from the mountainside of a mountain in Yu County. When the people entered the fog, they couldn't see their fingers in front of them. No matter how they walked, they would eventually come out of the fog. The initial suspicion was that a ghost was causing trouble, but the ghost didn't hurt anyone. The local government investigated and the county government's cultivators couldn't enter the fog. Yu County just reported it and the county government hasn't had time to deal with it yet. Li Mu couldn't let go of anything that could be related to Su He. He thought for a moment and said, "Which mountain in Yu County? I'll go take a look." Chapter 289. North Region. Yu County. A nameless mountain. This mountain had no name since ancient times. The people in the villages at the foot of the mountain made a living by gathering firewood and hunting. 3 days ago, in one night, a thick fog suddenly appeared on the mountainside. The fog was a vast expanse of white. After walking into the fog, it was difficult to see anything. It was so dark that one couldn't even see their fingers if they stretched out their hand. Not too long after the commoners walked into the fog, they would walk out of it again. It was as if they were walking around in circles. The cultivators from the county yamen who entered the fog also met the same fate as the commoners. Clearly, there was a formation set up in the fog that prevented outsiders from entering. Typically speaking, such a situation would only occur when the mountain was occupied by an expert. It was fortunate that the expert in the fog only occupied the mountain and didn't harm the commoners. The officials of Yu County didn't dare to disturb the person in the fog, so they could only report the situation to the county yamen and wait for the county yamen to deal with it. This mountain concerned the livelihood of the commoners at the foot of the mountain. The several hundred commoners at the foot of the mountain were also concerned about the situation in the fog. For the past 3 days, the fog had remained calm. However, an hour ago, it suddenly began to fluctuate intensely. It was unknown what terrifying thing had happened inside, but it left the commoners feeling uneasy. Halfway up the mountain, within the fog, more than 10 black silhouettes were using all kinds of demonic arts and artifacts to attack a formation. There were 2 women in the formation. Even though they were dressed differently, their appearances and figures were identical, as if they were twin sisters. No matter how one looked at them, one wouldn't be able to tell the difference between them. The only difference between the 2 was their temperament. One of them had a pale face, but there was gentleness in her eyes. On the other hand, the other had a frosty expression on her face, and there wasn't the slightest hint of life in her. The gentle-looking woman seemed to be severely injured. Her body seemed to be in a state between illusory and corporeal, as if she would dissipate at any moment. The other white-robed woman had a frosty expression on her face, and her aura was weak as well. It was clear that she was severely injured. The dozen or so black figures were clearly ghosts, and they were using all kinds of methods to attack the formation. Under their attacks, the formation was on the verge of collapse, and it was not far from being broken. I didn't think that we would have such a harvest this time around. Even though we didn't manage to find out the cause of Prince Chu Jiang of Gojoseon's death, we managed to find a severely injured spirit. This isn't a loss at all. If we can absorb her soul energy, we'll be able to take a step closer to the Spectre realm. There's also a flying stiff. If we capture it and sell it to the corpse sect, we'll definitely be able to exchange it for a lot of good stuff. When the time comes, we'll split it equally. The dozen or so ghosts communicated with each other, and the speed of their attacks increased. This formation, which was not very powerful, would soon be unable to hold on. Within the formation, Suhi's presence was already extremely weak. She looked at her other self and said, "My soul is about to disperse. Before it completely disperses, devour me. Only then will you have a chance to escape from them. I'll leave the matter of avenging us to you." The female corpse glanced at her. There was no expression on her cold face. She looked at the dozen or so black shadows outside the formation. 2 white fangs protruded from the corners of her mouth, and her fingernails grew an inch longer. Boom! A shockwave spread out in all directions, and the formation finally shattered under the all-out attack of the dozen or so ghosts. The dozen or so ghosts had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. As soon as the formation was broken, they immediately charged forward. The female corpse moved swiftly, leaving behind afterimages wherever she went. Her fingernails gleamed with a cold glint as they tore through the air. She stood guard by Suhi's side, preventing the dozen or so ghosts from getting close to her. Upon seeing this, the leader of the group immediately said, "Capture the female corpse first." The other ghosts gave up on approaching Suhi and began to work together to attack her. The body of the flying corpse was as tough as a steel wall. The ghost weapons in their hands were unable to deal much damage to her body. However, if they were scratched by the female corpse's fingernails, their souls would be damaged. The dozen or so ghosts cooperated well and quickly turned their attacks into entrapments. The ghost weapons in their hands turned into ghost chains surrounded by black gas. These ghost chains seemed to have a life of their own as they wandered in the air and quickly bound the female corpse's hands and feet. Even though she was extremely strong, she could not fight against 10 ghosts alone and was immediately restrained. The leader of the ghosts used all his strength to restrain the female corpse and said to another ghost beside him, "Go and kill that ghost first. She's heavily injured and can't fight back." Extract her soul energy and then deal with this flying corpse. The fourth realm vile spirit obeyed the order and walked to Su-hee's side with an excited look on his face. This was a fifth realm vile spirit. Even the 10 kings of hell under the Lord of Hell were merely vile spirits. When they saw such a powerful being, they would usually prostrate themselves in worship. How would they dare to attack them, let alone kill one with their own hands? He let out a sinister laugh and raised the ghost fork in his hand, stabbing it viciously at Su-hee. Boom! A purple thunderbolt exploded above his head. Wherever the thunderbolt passed, the white fog disappeared. When the thunderbolt landed on his head, he could not resist at all. His body dissipated and turned into pure soul energy. When the other ghosts saw this, they were horrified. However, before they could recover from their shock, purple thunderbolts also appeared above their heads. Most of these ghosts were third realm vile spirits. Only a few fourth realm vile spirits could resist the purple heavenly thunder, which could only be used by a fifth realm powerful being. They were directly wiped out without even having the slightest thought of resisting. Only the leader of the ghosts had something flickering in his body and withstood the thunderbolt. However, his aura was slightly weakened. When the lightning snakes danced wildly in the fog, he was already scared out of his wits. The purple heavenly thunder was a unique technique of the Tao Sect's creation realm powerful beings. They were as powerful as their masters, the 10 kings of hell. He gave up on the female corpse and wanted to escape without hesitation. However, the moment he turned around, a green sword shadow pierced through his chest. His body froze on the spot and dissipated into black fog. The fog tumbled and a figure walked out from the tumbling fog. The Qingxian sword flew back into his hand. After these ghosts were killed, the female corpse regained her mobility. She looked in the direction of the figure and raised her arms. Her body turned into an afterimage and reappeared midway. She remembered this person. She had seen him more than once when she was still trapped on the altar at the bottom of the water. Li Mu saw Su-hee at first glance. Her body was extremely illusory and seemed like it would dissipate at any moment. Li Mu did not care about the female corpse. He appeared beside Su-hee in an instant and helped her up. Su-hee looked at him and a smile appeared on her face. She said, "You're here." Li Mu hugged her and said, "Don't speak first." He silently recited the Heart Sutra and his body emitted a dazzling golden light. The female corpse reached out to block the light and was forced to take a few steps back. This time, the golden light emitted from Li Mu's body did not merge into Su-hee's body. Instead, it passed through her body. Li Mu's face darkened completely. He had encountered such a situation once before. A few months ago, he could only watch Xiaobai's grandmother die in her arms. Su-hee and Xiaobai's grandmother were in the same situation. Their souls had suffered irreversible damage. Su-hee looked at Li Mu and said regretfully, "I wanted to wait for you to come back and eat hot pot with you." Li Mu said, "There will be plenty of opportunities to eat hot pot in the future. Saving you is more important. I can't be saved." Su-hee smiled at Li Mu and said, "Don't be sad. I should have died 20 years ago. It wasn't a loss." Li Mu glanced at her and said, "Don't speak. I'll save you first." With a thought, a jade bottle appeared in his hand. It was the origin pill that the Empress had bestowed upon him. As long as her soul had not completely dissipated, this origin pill could save her. Li Mu wanted her to take the pill, but he discovered that her soul power was rapidly draining away. Looking down, Su-hee had already closed her eyes. He knew that things were not good. In this situation, she could not dissolve the medicinal power at all. The origin pill was a rare treasure. In order to avoid wasting it by mistake, it needed to be refined with magic power. With just a trace of magic power, the medicinal power could be stimulated. However, Su-hee could no longer use any magic power. Li Mu did not have time to think. He made a prompt decision and placed the origin pill into his mouth. Then he bent down and kissed Su-hee's lips. Li Mu used a trace of magic power to dissolve the pill and then transferred all of its medicinal power into Su-hee's body. Time seemed to stop for a moment. Su-hee's body emitted a strange aura. The soul power that she had just lost began to rapidly return to her body. Not only that, but the remaining soul power of the ghosts that Li Mu had killed was also absorbed into her body. Su He still did not wake up. This was because her injuries were too severe. Her soul had almost dissipated. The medicinal power of the origin pill would slowly restore her soul. This required a process. In Li Mu's arms, Su He's soul had already solidified. The origin pill truly lived up to its name. He let out a long sigh and looked up at the sky. He sincerely said, "Praise Her Majesty. If the Empress had not given him the origin pill, he would have lost Su He today. He would have watched her die in his arms. This would be the regret of his life." After returning to the divine capital, he decided to treat the Empress better. Otherwise, he would feel guilty. Sensing another aura beside him, Li Mu remembered that the female corpse was still here. He looked over. The female corpse that looked exactly like Su He was also looking at Li Mu. Her face was calm and expressionless. After glancing at Su He, she did not say a word and disappeared into the thick fog. Li Mu did not stop her. He had some doubts about the relationship between the female corpse and Su He. Logically speaking, the two of them were natural enemies. One had a soul while the other had a body. They would definitely want to devour each other to complete themselves. However, it was clear that if it had not been for the female corpse's protection, Su He would have died in the hands of those ghosts. Could it be that the corpse's self-born intelligence also knew the principle of born from the same root? There is no need to kill each other so quickly? Perhaps she thought that they were of the same root and did not want to kill each other. No matter the reason, she protected Su He and changed Li Mu's attitude towards her. If not for this, Li Mu would have eliminated her completely and erased her intelligence so that she would not threaten Su He in the future. Li Mu looked in the direction that the female corpse disappeared and said, "I will let you go today. I hope that you will cultivate the right path in the future and not harm the world. Otherwise, I will kill you personally." Low-level zombies relied on their instincts to cultivate by sucking people's blood. Flying zombies already had intelligence and could absorb moonlight, yin qi, spiritual qi, and other forces to cultivate. They did not need to suck human blood. She was born from spiritual qi and did not have the filthy corpse qi on her. She was different from the zombies that were born from filthy qi. Using human blood to cultivate was not good for her. She knew this better than Li Mu. After the female corpse left, she used the skill of calling the wind to disperse the white fog on the mountain. Then she carried Su He, hid herself, and left with the wind. At the foot of the mountain, the people looked up and saw that the fog that had lingered for several days had dispersed. They could not help but shout in joy. The fog is gone. The ghost fog is finally gone. We can finally go up the mountain to chop wood and hunt. Let's not rush. Let's report to the government office first and see what they say. In the crowd, a young child in a woman's arms looked up at the sky and said, "Mother, I saw someone flying in the sky." The woman raised her head and looked up. There was nothing in the sky. She looked at the child in her arms and worriedly looked at her husband beside her. She said, "My child's father, when the furs are sold, you should take Xiaobao to see a doctor." Li Mu carried Su He. He did not go straight home. Instead, he went to find the Green Bull Demon. The White Demon King's ice coffin had the effect of nourishing the primordial spirit. Li Mu took it from the Green Bull Demon and placed Su He's body inside. This could help her wake up sooner. Li Mu placed the ice coffin in the flask space. As for the tree demon, Li Mu tied it up with the immortal binding chains and threw it aside. After doing all this, he said to the Green Bull Demon, "If Brother White comes back, I'll have to trouble you to tell him that I'll be borrowing this ice coffin for a while. I'll return it to him when I'm done." The Green Bull Demon waved his hand and said, "You saved sister-in-law. This ice coffin is of no use to brother. You can take it." The White Demon King was really rich. He gave away 2 flask space rings. This ice coffin was also a rare treasure. It was said that the dragon race was the richest race in the world. This was probably not an exaggeration. Marrying a dragon was equivalent to marrying a treasure. However, Li Mu did not envy him. After all, he also had the Empress as a treasure. It was just a dragon. No matter how rich it was, Could it be richer than the empress of a country? Su-hee was already fine. Li Mu was finally relieved. What he needed to do next was to quickly return to the immortals' capital and hand the tree demon to the empress so that she could deal with Cui Ming. This matter could not be delayed at all. The phantom princess had escaped. She was very likely sent by Cui Ming. If she tipped off Cui Ming in advance and let Cui Ming escape, all his efforts these days would have been wasted. However, the inner guards had been watching Cui Ming. It was not likely that they would let him escape. Li Mu returned to the county. He planned to send Lu Hanyan back to Mount Baiyun and then immediately return to the immortals' capital. Walking on the streets, he heard the commoners discussing something. I heard that the county government caught 2 evil ghosts. Is it true? It's true. I saw it with my own eyes. They were 2 female ghosts. They were quite pretty and didn't look very old. I don't know what they did to harm people. Our Yangqiu County is becoming more and more chaotic. In the past 6 months, who knows how many people have been harmed by demons, ghosts, and zombies. Li Mu had already walked past the county government. However, when he heard that the county government had caught 2 young female ghosts, he turned around and walked back. After the Gulf of Clearwater was destroyed, the 2 female ghosts that he had sent to Su-hee to accompany her had also disappeared. It couldn't be that coincidental, right? He arrived at the county government and found Constable Zhou. He asked, I heard that the county government caught 2 female ghosts. Did they harm people? Constable Zhou shook his head and said, that's not the case. However, those 2 wraiths have been wandering around the vicinity of Clearwater Bay. The county magistrate suspects that they have a motive for harming people and is planning to interrogate them. When he heard that there were 2 female ghosts wandering around the Gulf of Clearwater, Li Mu knew that it should be that female ghost. He looked at Constable Zhou and said, can you let me see those 2 female ghosts? Constable Zhou hesitated for a moment and said, come with me. It was reasonable to say that Li Mu was no longer a constable of the county government and had no right to enter the county government prison. However, the friendship between the 2 was still there. Constable Zhou made an exception for him this time. The county government prison. The 2 female ghosts, one big and one small, were chained up by 2 chains. Their powers were restricted. The small ghost shrank into a corner and shivered. Big sister, will we be killed? The big ghost was also not sure. However, she still comforted her. Don't worry. We didn't do anything bad. As the county magistrate of Yangqiu, for the safety of the people, I have to guard against any possible dangers. As a constable, you actually pleaded for mercy on behalf of 2 evil ghosts. I feel that you should be replaced as a constable. Constable Zhou braced himself and said, Sir, I used to have a colleague. His name is Li Mu. A few months ago, he also worked in the county government. He has an old relationship with those 2 female ghosts. I can guarantee that they didn't harm anyone in the past. The county magistrate of Yangqiu's face gradually turned cold. He didn't care whether those 2 female ghosts harmed anyone or not. He had just arrived at Yangqiu County. If he didn't kill a few demonic ghosts as a sacrifice to the heavens, how could he establish his authority as an official? He had long disliked this Zhou guy. He wanted to arrange his confidant in that position, but he didn't have a suitable opportunity. This time, he had an excuse to replace him. He snorted and said, so what if he's an arrestor of the county government? If the arrestor of the county government says he can. As he spoke, he suddenly realized something and asked, what's the arrestor's name? Constable Zhou said, Li Mu. The county magistrate of Yangqiu County gulped and asked, where is he working now? Constable Zhou said, in Fairy's capital. I think he's an arrestor of some government office. After confirming that this Li Mu was the Li Mu he knew, the county magistrate of Yangqiu County trembled and said in a panic, quick, take me to see him. The county government prison. The county magistrate of Yangqiu County saw a familiar figure. He quickly walked over and said with a smile, Sir Li, what brings you here? If you had told me before you came, I would have gone out to welcome you personally. Constable Zhou followed behind him. He looked at this scene in a daze and couldn't come back to his senses. Li Mu looked at the stranger in front of him and asked, do we know each other? The county magistrate of Yangqiu County hurriedly said, "You don't know me, but I know you. I used to be in charge of the Ministry of Justice. I just came to Yangqiu County a few days ago. I met Sir Li at the Ministry of Justice a few days ago." Li Mu had been to the Ministry of Justice a few days ago, but he didn't remember that there was such a person in charge there. After Yangqiu County magistrate finished speaking, he pointed at the door of the prison cell and said angrily, "Hurry up and release these two girls. How can the constables of the county yamen do things? How can they catch ghosts without distinguishing between right and wrong? What have I taught you all? No matter if it's to catch people, ghosts, or demons, you must have evidence. Each and every one of you has turned a deaf ear to my words," he reprimanded angrily, but when he looked at Li Mu, a smile appeared on his face. He said guiltily, "Sir Li, it's all my fault for not being strict enough and arresting your friends. Please, Sir Li, don't blame me." Chapter 290. Li Mu looked at the county magistrate who was extremely nervous and comforted him. "Sir, don't be nervous. You've caught the wrong people. Just release them. Relax, it'll be fine. Yes, yes, yes." The county magistrate repeatedly agreed. He bowed to the two female ghosts who had been released and said, "The county government didn't investigate properly and caught the wrong two. I apologize to the two ladies here." The two female ghosts, one adult and one child, had never seen such a scene. They were so nervous that they couldn't even speak. Li Mu saluted the county magistrate and said, "Since it's a misunderstanding, can I take my two friends and leave?" The county magistrate immediately extended his hand. "Sir Li, please." When he walked out of the prison, he probed again, "Sir Li, you don't blame me, do you?" Li Mu smiled and asked, "Do I look like such a petty person?" The county magistrate's expression changed and he immediately said, "That's not what I meant. Please forgive me, Sir Li, I'm just kidding." Li Mu smiled and said, "Yangqiu County is my hometown. I'll come back to visit often. You're the parent official here. You must govern Yangqiu County well," the county magistrate promised. "Don't worry, Sir Li. I'll do my best." Li Mu looked at Constable Zhou and said, "I'll have to trouble Constable Zhou." Constable Zhou immediately said, I wouldn't dare. Li Mu smiled at him and said, "I came back this time because I have something important to do. I have to report back to Fairy's capital immediately. The next time I return to Yangqiu County, I'll find you for a drink." Constable Zhou's expression changed. With his experience, how could he not understand that Li Mu's words in front of the county magistrate had a deeper meaning? Although he still didn't know why the county magistrate was so afraid of Li Mu, with Li Mu's words, although he couldn't do whatever he wanted in the county government, at least the county magistrate wouldn't dare to touch him easily. Li Mu and the two female ghosts bid farewell to Constable Zhou and left the county government. County Magistrate Yang Qiu wiped the sweat off his forehead and realized that his back was drenched in cold sweat. Constable Zhou looked at him and asked, "Sir, Li Mu he?" Yangqiu County Magistrate swallowed his saliva and said, "He's actually from Yangqiu County. He had only been in Yangqiu County for a few days. Before that, he had been working in the Ministry of Justice. He knew everything Li Mu had done and shouldn't do. He had pointed at the doctor's nose and scolded him in the Ministry of Justice. He had chased and beaten up the children of influential families on the street. After that, he had swaggered out of the Ministry of Justice. He had seen all these with his own eyes. He had scolded hundreds of officials in the imperial court and fought with the deputy director of Dongxian County. In addition, he had caused Zhou Chu to be punished by heaven. After that, the Zhou family didn't even fart. If such a person held a grudge against him, he didn't even dare to think about the possibility. After a while, Yangqiu County Magistrate Yang Qiu took a deep breath and patted Constable Zhou's shoulder, saying, "Do a good job. I have faith in you." After walking out of the county government, Li Mu turned to look at the two female ghosts and said, "Sister Su is still in a deep sleep. It should take some time for her to wake up. You too, do you want to find a cave to cultivate or follow me and wait for her to wake up?" The two girls said almost at the same time without hesitation, "Follow you." They had already experienced the fate of two lonely souls drifting about in the outside world. They were either devoured and enslaved by stronger ghosts or captured by the government. The days in Clearwater Bay were the most comfortable and peaceful days in their two lives. Following Sister Sue, not only did they not have to worry about being bullied, but they could also receive guidance and cultivation. This was something that the two lonely ghosts could not even dream of. The two female ghosts made a decision. Li Mu threw them a few pieces of spiritual jade and let them cultivate in the flask heaven space. They also took care of the tree demon. Only then did he return home. Tonight was the last night he would spend with Lu Hanyan. In the next 2 months, he had to prepare for the imperial examination. The imperial examination policy was originally set by him, so he knew better than anyone how to take the examination. After the imperial examination, he would be busy for some time. In this way, the next time he returned to Beijing would be at least 3 or even 4 months later. This meant that he could accompany them for a period of time like this. If it was just meeting and dual cultivating for a night, he could come back at any time as long as he asked for leave from the Empress. However, Lu Hanyan also had to go into seclusion for a period of time when she returned to Mount Baiyun this time. She had to master some of the divine powers and spells that she had just learned. The possibility of the two of them meeting often was not high. The next morning, after sending her and Wan back to the mountain, Li Mu and Xiao Bai did not delay. They used high-level divine travel talismans to rush back to the fairy's capital at the fastest speed. They did not rest along the way and finally made it back in the early morning of the third day. Ziwei Palace. The morning assembly had just begun. After Li Mu was summoned into the palace, he cupped his fists and said, "Your Majesty, I was ordered by Your Majesty to go to Beijing to investigate the incident 20 years ago. When Princess Yunyang's son-in-law, Cui Ming, killed a woman from Yangqiu County, he was ambushed by a fifth realm demon. I used the Dharma treasure Your Majesty gave me to capture this demon and found out that it was sent by Cui Ming to find that woman's soul to silence her." As soon as Li Mu finished speaking, all the officials were shocked. The previous incident had already caused Cui Ming to lose his position. Unexpectedly, Li Mu did not plan to let him go. It was obvious that his goal was to kill Cui Ming. In order to protect himself, Princess Consort Cui did not hesitate to send a demon to assassinate Li Mu. However, he did not expect that Li Mu had a treasure from His Majesty. Not only did he fail to assassinate him, but he was also captured by Li Mu and betrayed him. The assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel stood up and said, "Your Majesty, this is only Censor Li's side of the story. The truth has yet to be verified." Li Mu's mind moved, and the trussed-up tree demon appeared in the palace. He said calmly, "I brought this demon here. Your Majesty, you will know if I am slandering Cui Ming by searching its soul. As long as it was not treason or rebellion, one could not search the soul of an official in the imperial court. However, for non-officials of the Great Zhou, especially demons and ghosts, there was no such restriction. If one wanted to find out the truth, searching the soul was the simplest and most convenient method. The minister stood up and said, "Your Majesty, I am willing to search the soul of this demon." Shang Guanli looked back and said, "I will have to trouble you, minister." Although Cui Ming was from the old party and the minister was from the new party, the minister was from the Zhou family. Li Mu and the Zhou family had a death feud. Now, Cui Ming was no longer of any use in the imperial court. The minister did not need to help Li Mu lie to get rid of him, and he would not help Li Mu. It was most suitable for him to step forward. Shang Shuling stepped forward and placed his hand on the tree demon's forehead. He closed his eyes and said slowly, "This demon is indeed Cui Ming's subordinate. It was ordered by Cui Ming to go to Yangqiu County to silence him." Hearing this, the officials had an idea. Princess Consort Cui had already used the golden medallion to avoid death once. If this case was confirmed, it would be enough to make him lose his life. Li Mu really wanted to kill Cui Ming. While the officials were discussing in low voices, the minister's eyes suddenly opened. His face darkened and he said sternly, "Cui Ming is really bold. How dare he collude with the demon sect?" The moment he said this, the entire hall fell silent for a moment. Then there was a huge uproar. "What? Princess Consort Chui colluded with the demon sect? How is that possible? Wasn't the Zhejiang County chief the one who colluded with the demon sect? Princess Consort Chui was the one who exposed it. Could there be another story behind the Zhejiang County chief's case? Could it be that the one who colluded with the demon sect was Chui Ming? He first colluded with the demon sect and then joined forces with the demon sect to frame the Zhejiang County chief? The minister's words were like a huge rock thrown into a calm lake, causing huge waves. Li Mu had a look of realization. If the one who colluded with the demon sect was Chui Ming, then Phantom Princess must have been sent by Chui Ming. If Chui Ming had colluded with the demon sect, he could have worked with the demon sect more than 10 years ago to frame the Zhejiang County chief for a promotion. Why would the demon sect help Chui Ming? Perhaps Chui Ming didn't collude with the demon sect. He was originally a member of the demon sect. Li Mu thought of Phantom Princess. She and Chui Ming had something in common. Both of them were unusually beautiful. Phantom Princess was from the Meizong sect. Could Chui Ming also be a spy from the Meizong sect in the imperial court? If Li Mu could think of this, so could everyone else in the imperial court. The minister had finished searching the soul of the tree demon. He said with a murderous tone, "Your Majesty, from this demon's memory, I found out that Chui Ming is a member of the demon sect. He is also a spy from the Meizong sect. More than 10 years ago, the case of the Zhejiang County chief colluding with the demon sect was also framed by Chui Ming and the demon sect. Preposterous! How dare he? A spy from the demon sect. He actually has a high position in the imperial court and has been hiding by our side for so many years." At this moment, an old man stood out and said, "Your Majesty, this is a serious matter. Can you let me search the demon's soul again to confirm it?" Sheng Guanli heard the Empress's telepathic message and nodded. "I'll have to trouble you, Minister." All the officials looked at the old man. The minister was very experienced. He was an old official from the previous emperor's era. He was neither a friend nor a foe and was deeply loved by the people. He was also a sixth realm powerhouse. Both the new and old parties respected him very much. The old man slowly walked forward and pressed his skinny right hand on the demon's head. After a while, he slowly opened his eyes and said solemnly, "Your Majesty, the minister is right. Chui Ming is a guardian of the Meizong sect. The case of the Zhejiang County chief was framed by Chui Ming and the demon sect." Chapter 291. If what Zhou Jing said was true, there was still a slight possibility that the head of the Secretariat would use this opportunity to suppress the old faction of the royal family. Then the head of the Secretariat would completely eliminate this small possibility. The head of the Secretariat was the head of all the officials, and the head of the Secretariat was only second to the head of the Secretariat. Furthermore, he had no enmity with Chui Ming. How could the two of them deceive the Empress and the officials at the same time? The Assistant Minister of Personnel, who was speaking up for Chui Ming, immediately turned pale and sweated profusely. He knelt on the ground and said loudly, "Your Majesty, I swear to the heavens that I was also deceived by Chui Ming. I didn't know that he was colluding with the demon sect." At this moment, no one in the imperial court cared about the Assistant Minister of Personnel. The imperial court would investigate whether or not he knew, or whether or not he was a spy for the demon sect. Not only him, but anyone close to Chui Ming would be thoroughly investigated. The demon sect was notorious. They harmed the people and tried to overthrow the imperial court. No country would tolerate the demon sect. The governor of Zhejiang was a high-ranking official in the imperial court. However, because of the crime of colluding with the demon sect, his family of more than 100 people was killed. Even his soul didn't survive. Chui Ming's case involved the demon sect. It was a serious matter. Colluding with the demon sect was equivalent to treason. The Empress immediately ordered the Ministry of Justice and the Supreme Court to take control of the people in Princess Yunyang's residence. Anyone close to Chui Ming, whether they were officials in the imperial court or nobles in Luoyang, would be strictly interrogated without exception. After the imperial court was dismissed, the officials left with solemn expressions. After Li Mu walked out of the main hall, he didn't leave the palace. Instead, he went to Shangyang Palace. Before the imperial court was dismissed, he received a message from Shangguanli. The empress wanted to see him. Li Mu returned to the North County with a mission. He needed to meet the empress to report on his work. After arriving at Shangyang Palace, he told the empress everything that had happened, including the assassination attempt by Phantom Princess, how they caught her and let her escape. The Ministry of Justice and the Supreme Court acted quickly. As soon as Li Mu finished speaking, the Minister of Justice and the Minister of the Supreme Court asked for an audience outside Shangyang Palace. After the Empress issued the summons, the Minister of Justice and the Minister of the Supreme Court walked into the main hall. The Minister of Justice had a solemn expression as he said, "Your Majesty, a day ago, Cui Ming and Princess Yunyang went to the Divine Dragon Court to play and have yet to return. Your subject and the Minister of the Supreme Court went to the Divine Dragon Court and discovered that only Princess Yunyang was unconscious in her room. Cui Ming's whereabouts were unknown." Hearing this, Shangguan Li's expression changed slightly. She said, "Impossible. The internal guards have been watching Cui Ming. He has never left the Divine Dragon Court." Li Mu wasn't surprised. With Cui Ming's cultivation, there were countless ways for him to leave quietly. Obviously, the speed at which Cui Ming received the news was much faster than the speed at which Li Mu traveled. It was very likely that he and the demon sect were communicating with each other through some kind of magical item or secret technique. The Empress closed her eyes and pinched her fingers. After a while, she slowly opened her eyes and said sternly, "He went to the north. Send an order to the 36 counties." Princess Yunyang's husband, Cui Ming, colluded with the demon sect and framed an official of the imperial court. Once discovered, he is to be arrested immediately, dead or alive. "Yes, Your Majesty." Li Mu immediately realized how important instant communication was. He looked at the Empress and asked, "Your Majesty, is there any magical item that can instantly transmit messages from 1,000 miles away? If I had such a magical item, I wouldn't have given Cui Ming the chance to escape." The Empress thought for a while and stretched out her hand. An item appeared in her palm. It was a white item that looked like a conch shell. The conch shell slowly floated in front of Li Mu and he held it in his hand. The Empress said, "If there is an emergency, use your magic to activate this conch shell and speak to it. I will then be able to hear your voice." Li Mu happily accepted the treasure and asked again, "Your Majesty, is there any item that can instantly send someone 1,000 miles away? Can you give me one? If it wasn't for this treasure, Huanji wouldn't have been able to escape from me." Hearing this, the Minister of Justice and the Minister of Justice looked at Li Mu a few more times. The Empress glanced at him and said, "The teleportation talisman requires a powerhouse above the transcendence level. It takes a lot of time and effort to make it. I don't have one either." Li Mu felt that it was a pity. He thought for a while and said, "Your Majesty, do you have any more fate pills? I used the one you gave me last time." "No more." The Empress waved her sleeve and Li Mu was violently swept out of the door. She didn't need to chase him away so violently. Li Mu tidied his clothes and slowly walked out of the palace. Cui Ming had escaped, but he couldn't escape forever. His actions had crossed the bottom line of the imperial court. Even if he ran to the ends of the earth, he couldn't escape the imperial court's pursuit. He had lived in the divine capital for more than a decade and left behind countless traces. His voice wasn't loud, but it brought endless vitality to this deathly silent world. Zhou Yi cleared her throat and made her voice dignified. She asked, "What is it?" Li Mu did not expect the Empress to still be awake. He slowly said, "I think that the imperial court should announce the injustice the Zhejiang prefectural governor suffered to the world. This is the only way to clear his name." Zhou Yi thought for a moment and said, "Tomorrow I will issue an edict and order the Ministry of Works to erect a monument and a temple in Zhejiang prefectural governor's memory for future generations." The Empress thought more than he thought. Li Mu sighed. "Your Majesty is wise." Zhou Yi asked, "Is there anything else?" Li Mu thought for a moment and said, Your Majesty, do you have many conches that can transmit messages? Your Majesty, my fiancé is in the northern prefectural, thousands of miles away from me. It is inconvenient for us to meet. I want to give her one. Chapter 292. After obtaining this magical conch, Li Mu suddenly had an idea. If he could give one to Lu Hanyan, then even if the two of them were thousands of miles apart, one in Beijing and the other in Shendu, they would still be able to talk to each other in real time. Making conch porridge every night was something that he could look forward to. Instead of calling this conch a magical item, it was more like a phone that could only talk to one person. In Chengel Palace, Zhou Yi said calmly, "No." Li Mu was a little disappointed, but he was prepared. After all, if he had 3 of these things, wouldn't the Empress be eavesdropping on him and Lu Hanyan when they were being sweet? This would be too much of a shock to her. After all, she was almost 30 years old and was still single. It was inevitable that she would be envious when she saw other couples. He couldn't let her see other people in love. Should he ask for her conch and give it to Lu Hanyan? This bold idea only flashed through Li Mu's mind for a moment before he extinguished it. With the Empress's breadth of mind, she wouldn't give Li Mu a conch. She would only give him a whip. "I'm sorry for being presumptuous. Good night, Your Majesty. I'll hang up first." Announcing to the world that the Zhejiang prefectural governor was innocent had already been reported to the Empress. Li Mu was about to put down the conch when the Empress's voice came again. "Tell me about you and your fiancé." Li Mu was stunned. He didn't expect the Empress to be so nosy. It wasn't a big deal to talk about his experience with Lu Hanyan, but it seemed a little cruel to tell an old single dog about it. This was no longer abusing a single dog, but killing a dog. However, this was the Empress's own request, and she didn't give Li Mu a choice. Li Mu thought for a moment and said, "That was almost a year ago. At that time, I was still a constable in Yangqiu County. She had just moved to Yangqiu County and lived next door to me." As Li Mu narrated the story to the Empress, he also recalled the process of how he and Lu Hanyan met, got to know each other, and fell in love with each other. In his 2 lifetimes, he had only been in a serious relationship. From the beginning, the 2 of them were hostile to each other. Later on, they were inseparable. Who knew how many twists and turns they had gone through in the process? Li Mu added, "In less than a year, she will come to the capital and we will get married there. If you have time at that time, you can come to my home for the wedding banquet. My wife admires you a lot and won't let me say anything bad about you," the Empress asked calmly. "Did you speak ill of me?" Li Mu hurriedly explained, "What I mean is that she is very protective of your Majesty, just like how I am protective of your Majesty." The Empress was silent for a moment and asked, "Why are you protecting me?" If the Empress had not given him enlightenment when he was at a bottleneck, Li Mu would probably still be stuck at the concentrating spirit realm. Not only did she help Li Mu break through to the next level, but in the past few nights, she had also used the dream entry technique to teach Li Mu divine abilities in his dreams. Under her guidance, Li Mu made rapid progress. In just 3 days, he had mastered 2 divine abilities. Other than that, Li Mu would also play chess with her in his dreams and chat with her. Of course, most of the time, he was asking the Empress questions about his cultivation. After watching Madame Chu leave, Li Mu returned home and cooked dinner. After hesitating for a while, he took out the conch and activated it with his spiritual power. "Your Majesty, have you eaten?" There was no response from the conch for a long time. Just as Li Mu was about to put it away, the space in the courtyard rippled and the Empress appeared out of thin air. Li Mu was very envious of her ability to transform into a living person. However, the teleportation technique required one to be at the peak of Dongxian. He still had a long way to go. When he was in the North region, he used the nature pill to save Su He. Li Mu planned to care more for the Empress when he returned to the divine capital. She was actually just an ordinary woman trapped in a cage. This had nothing to do with her identity as an empress, nor did it have anything to do with her transcendent strength. What she needed the most was not power or strength, but family and friends. Li Mu could not be her family. He could only try his best to be her friend. Moreover, with the healing element Xiao Bai around, she should be able to experience some feelings that the Empress could not in the palace. After the meal, the Empress gave Xiao Bai some pointers on her cultivation. Before she left, she suddenly looked at Xiao Bai and asked, "Do you want to go to the palace with me to play?" Xiao Bai was a little tempted. However, she first looked at Li Mu. Li Mu nodded and said, "If you want to go, you can go with Sister Zhou." As a single dog, she did not sleep in the middle of the night and made conch porridge with Li Mu just to listen to his love story with Lu Hanyan. It was enough to see how lonely the Empress was. Xiao Bai was naturally adorable. If she stayed by the Empress's side, she could relieve some of her loneliness. Different from Shangguan Li and Mr. Mei, in Xiao Bai's heart, there was no Empress of the Great Zhou. There was only Sister Zhou who treated her very well and gave her the essence of the celestial fox. The Empress did not lack people who respected her. What she lacked were people who were not afraid of her identity as the Empress and treated her as an equal. Since ancient times, it had been lonely at the top. Whether it was the peak of strength or the peak of status, once one climbed to the top, it was easy to become lonely. Xiao Bai had been longing for the beautiful scenery of the imperial garden for a long time. After seeing Li Mu agree, she happily held the Empress's hand and said, "Okay, okay." The two figures disappeared in front of Li Mu again. Li Mu walked to the courtyard and began to practice his new supernatural power. After a while, in the imperial garden, Zhou Yi looked at Xiao Bai and asked, "Xiao Bai, how did you meet Li Mu?" Speaking of this, a brilliant smile appeared on Xiao Bai's face as she said, "Before I could transform, I accidentally fell into a hunter's trap. It was Benefactor who saved me and even bandaged my wounds. From then on, I swore to repay Benefactor." Zhou Yi asked curiously, "How?" Xiao Bai blushed slightly and said, "I want to marry Benefactor and stay by his side for the rest of my life." Zhou Yi was slightly stunned and asked, "Doesn't he already have a fiancée?" Xiao Bai said, "Benefactor has Sister Lu and Sister Wanwen, but he can also have me. The three of us will accompany Benefactor for the rest of our lives." Zhou Qiong had already forgotten a certain matter, but Xiao Bai's words caused her to involuntarily recall the absurd scene she had seen in Li Mumu's dream that night. This caused her, who had never experienced something like this before, to feel an indescribable panic in her heart. She even felt a deep sense of fear. Then she was suddenly shocked. On the path of cultivation, this was not the first time she had felt this. This was an inner demon. As her cultivation increased, the inner demon would also become stronger. Once an inner demon was born, the consequences would be unimaginable. She wanted to suppress this palpitating heart, but the more she tried not to think about it, the clearer the image in her mind became. With great difficulty, she finally suppressed this palpitating heart with supreme determination. In her heart, she was already extremely regretful. She had transformed into the woman in his dream and played with him in every possible way, causing Li Mu to mistakenly think that an inner demon had appeared. Now, she had finally received her retribution. Moreover, she could not blame Li Mu for this at all. Because she had invaded Li Mu's dream without his consent, she could only blame herself. Xiao Bai was playing in the imperial garden, while Zhou Yi returned to her bedroom and sat cross-legged on the bed. The matter of an inner demon could not be underestimated. If it was ignored, the cultivation would stagnate at best, and the cultivation would regress at worst, or even suffer from qi deviation. Her inner demon had arisen because of Li Mu. The simplest and fastest way was naturally to kill Li Mu, and the inner demon would naturally be eliminated. But she could not and would not do so. How could she bear to kill the most understanding and supportive of her? "I just want to ask if Cui Ming has been caught." Mr. May shook his head and said, "Not yet, but Ali has gone after him personally. She has many masters around her, and she can track Cui Ming all the way. He can't escape." "That's good." Li Mu nodded and said, "Then I'll go back first. Goodbye, Sister May." Mr. May watched him leave, thought for a moment, and said, "Wait." Li Mu turned around and asked, "Is there anything else?" Mr. May asked, "Did you make His Majesty angry again?" Li Mu shook his head. Recently, not only did he not speak ill of her behind her back, but he was even nicer to her. He couldn't figure out why the Empress had suddenly become cold to him. Mr. May said helplessly, "Then you go back first. I'll let you know if there's any news about Cui Ming." Li Mu nodded and turned to leave again. Mr. May walked into the Changle Palace and looked at the Empress who was dealing with the memorials. His lips moved as if he had something to ask, but he didn't say anything in the end. Zhou Yi closed a memorial and looked out of the palace. A trace of helplessness appeared in the depths of her eyes. The inner demon of the transcendent realm was no small matter. It took her a lot of effort to suppress it. If she saw Li Mu, she was afraid that all her efforts would be in vain. Outside the Changle Palace, a maid on duty glanced at the Changle Palace and hurried away. A moment later, in the Fusho Palace of the West Palace, the Empress Dowager looked at a maid kneeling in the palace and asked, "Is what you said true? That Li Mu went to the palace to see Her Majesty, but Her Majesty didn't see him?" The maid nodded and said, "It's true. Commander May told Li Mu that Her Majesty wasn't in the palace. But I saw with my own eyes that Her Majesty entered the Changle Palace 15 minutes ago and didn't come out after that. She must have deliberately not seen him." The Empress Dowager said suspiciously, "Li Mu is her favorite. Why didn't she see him?" The maid said, "Not only did Her Majesty not see him this time, but during the morning court he was supposed to take over Commander Shangwan's position. But today, he was replaced by Commander May. I guess that Li Mu has fallen out of favor." Fallen out of favor? A cold smile gradually appeared on the Empress Dowager's face. She said sarcastically, "He deserves it. Because of him, I lost the only death exemption token bestowed by the late emperor. I haven't settled this debt with him yet. What will happen to a dog that has lost its master?" A maid beside her said, "Empress Dowager, even the academy can't defeat Li Mu. You must be careful." The Empress Dowager twitched her mouth and said, "He has offended so many people in the Luoyang. There are so many people who want him dead. I don't need to do it myself. As long as I spread the news that he has fallen out of favor, someone will do it for me." After leaving the palace, Li Mu didn't go home. Instead, he went to an inn. He carried a jar of wine and knocked on a door on the second floor of the inn. Li Si was holding a book in his hand. He was swaying his head as he read. When he opened the door and saw Li Mu, he asked in confusion, "Why are you here?" These days, Li Si was preparing for the imperial examination. He had been studying hard in the inn. Li Mu had only seen him a few times. Li Mu put the jar of wine on the table and said, "I have a question to ask you." Li Si waved his hand. He stared at the book and said, "Wait, let me finish this part first." Li Mu took the book from his hand and said, "You don't have to memorize it. This part won't be tested." Li Si glanced at him and said, "How do you know it won't be tested? Are you the one who set the questions?" Although the questions weren't set by Li Mu, the official who set the questions had to set the questions according to the outlines set by Li Mu. Li Mu returned the book to Li Si and said, "Believe it or not." Li Si looked at Li Mu and threw the book away decisively. He said, "Remember to tell me what the questions are a few days in advance." Li Mu said, "There aren't any questions. I can highlight the key points for you. In the end, you still have to rely on yourself." "Enough, enough." Li Si sat down and opened the jar of wine. He poured a bowl of wine for him and Li Mu. He said, "Tell me, what's the problem?" Li Mu said slowly, "I have a friend who has encountered some problems recently." Li Si glanced at him and asked, "Do I know this friend of yours?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "You don't know the friends I have in Luoyang." He continued, "This friend of mine has a friend of the opposite sex. A few days ago, this friend of the opposite sex was very good to him. From time to time, he would give him expensive gifts and treat him to meals. The two of them would talk about life and dreams together. But recently, this friend of the opposite sex suddenly became cold to my friend. He didn't even want to see him. Why is that? Li Si asked. Did you offend her? Not me. It's my friend. Did your friend offend her? Li Mu shook his head and said, no. Not only did he not offend her, he was very good to her. I don't know why she suddenly became like this. Li Si took a sip of wine and touched his chin. He said, there are 3 possibilities. First, you are her target, but only one of them. She is cold to you because she has someone else she is passionate about. Li Mu shook his head. The Empress was not the kind of person who would two-time. Li Si looked at him and continued, the second possibility is that she is tired of you and doesn't want to waste her passion on you. Li Mu corrected, it's my friend. Li Si said, sorry, it's your friend. Li Mu and the Empress had a superior and subordinate relationship. They were not in a romantic relationship. He looked at Li Si and asked, what's the third possibility? Li Si didn't answer directly. Instead, he asked, can you beat Lady Lu now? Does this have anything to do with this question? I'm just asking. Li Mu thought for a moment and said, I can't beat him. This wasn't a question of whether or not he could beat her, but whether or not he could fight back. Even if Li Mu had transcended, he was still no match for Lu Hanyan. Li Si looked at him with an inexplicable gaze and said, the third possibility is, congratulations to you, no, congratulations to your friend. That woman likes him. She is sometimes cold and sometimes hot, sometimes aloof. These are all tricks between men and women. Only in this way would your friend feel nervous. If my guess is correct, after a short period of coldness, she will become passionate about your friend again. This time, Li Mu didn't agree with Li Si's analysis. Although he and the Empress weren't like Lord and Minister, they weren't lovers either. It was precisely because of this that he couldn't understand the Empress's sudden coldness. A woman's heart was like a needle at the bottom of the sea. Only a girl as cute and innocent as Xiao Bai, whose thoughts were written all over her face, didn't need him to guess. In the next few days, a rumor began to circulate among the court officials. Li Mu, the imperial censor of the palace, had fallen out of favor. First, he lost his status as a close official who could convey the Empress's decree. Then, when he asked to see the Empress, he was rejected. In the next few days, Li Mu didn't even attend the morning court, and the Empress didn't say anything about it. All of this showed that Li Mu had fallen out of favor. He had no status or background. The only thing he relied on was the Empress's favor. Without the Empress's favor, any random official in the court could kill him hundreds or thousands of times. Li residence. After the morning court, Zhang Chun hurried over. Li Mu was cooking in the kitchen. He said, Old Zhang, you came just in time. Go and call Li Si. Let's drink together. Drink my ass. Zhang Chun quickly walked over and asked, what happened between you and the Empress? Li Mu said, nothing. Zhang Chun said anxiously, nothing? Everyone in the court is saying that you've fallen out of favor. Aren't you worried at all? Li Mu said indifferently, it's up to the Empress to decide whether I've fallen out of favor or not. What's the use of being worried? Zhang Chun hurriedly said, you're not worried, but I am. As someone who's been through it, let me give you a piece of advice. Between a man and a woman, if there's any misunderstanding between a man and a woman, it's better to talk it out. Don't hold it in. The longer you hold it in, the bigger the problem. Zhou Zhong stood up and said, all right. Li Mu arrived at the Ministry of Justice and entered the court. He saw Zhou Zhong sitting at the front, and a woman kneeling at the front. The woman was in her early 20s. Her hair was messy, and her face was filled with fear. When she saw Li Mu, she retreated a few steps, and her eyes were filled with terror. This was the first time Li Mu had seen this woman, but she seemed to be very afraid of him. Zhou Zhong looked down at Li Mu and asked, there is a case that involves Imperial Censor Li. I will now ask you a few questions, and I hope you can answer truthfully. Li Mu said calmly, Go ahead, Assistant Minister Zhou. Zhou Zhong said, Where were you last night at midnight? Li Mu said, I was resting at home. Last night, he had been waiting for the Empress to fall asleep, and only slept very late. Zhou Zhong asked, Is there a witness? At midnight, Xiao Bai had already fallen asleep in her room. Li Mu shook his head and said, No. Zhou Zhong said, The person kneeling in front of the court is a woman from Yonghe Lane. She came to the Ministry of Justice today to report that she was raped at home last night at midnight. According to her, the person who raped her was you, Imperial Censor Li. Do you have anything to say about this? Li Mu looked at the woman and said, I was at home last night and did not go out. It is even more impossible for me to go to Yonghe Lane and rape her. Why is this lady falsely accusing me? Zhou Zhong looked at Li Mu and said, If Lord Li has a clear conscience, can you allow me to perform a soul search? A soul search was different from a soul search. Under a soul search, a person's memories would be flipped through without any secrets. A soul search was only used to ask specific questions, and was most often used by the government during investigations. A soul search was useless against Li Mu. The art of tranquility could keep one's heart calm at all times. Not to mention Zhou Zhong, even the Empress could not use a soul search to find out the secrets in Li Mu's heart. He said directly to Zhou Zhong, Assistant Minister Zhou's soul-searching technique is useless against me. There is no need to expend any more mana. Furthermore, under the circumstances where there is no evidence, it is against the law to search the soul of the accused. The accuser should produce evidence and not have the accused prove his innocence. Zhou Zhong thought for a moment and nodded. He looked at the woman again and asked, Lady Su, you said that Censor Li raped you last night. Do you have evidence? Lady Su raised her head and said, I saw it with my own eyes and experienced it personally. It is the evidence. Zhou Zhong looked at her and said, Lord Li is an official of the imperial court. Since you want to accuse him, are you willing to accept a soul search? If you lie, I will punish you severely. Lady Su did not hesitate and said, I am willing. Zhou Zhong walked down and pressed his palm on her head. The woman's gaze gradually became dazed. After a moment, Zhou Zhong waved his hand and images appeared in front of everyone in the court. Although these images were static, it was not difficult to see what had happened last night when they were all connected. The images were very clear. It was obvious that a masked man in black had barged into the woman's house and violated her. At the critical moment, the woman pulled off the black cloth covering the man's face. Under the black cloth was Li Mu's face. Zhou Zhong looked at Li Mu and asked, Censor Li, do you have anything else to say? Li Mu did not explain anything. He only said, I believe that the Ministry of Justice will clear my name. Zhou Zhong said, Although this case cannot be concluded, Lord Li, you are a major suspect. I'm afraid I can't let you leave the Ministry of Justice so easily. Men, take Li Mu into custody for now. After I investigate this case, I will try him again. 2 constables walked forward and said, Lord Li, please. In the court, the director of the Ministry of Justice had a look of disbelief. He said, That's impossible. I've seen the girl by Constable Li's side. She is 1,000 times more beautiful than this woman. How could Constable Li give up what is close at hand for what is far away? One of the constables said, That's not necessarily the case. How can a domestic flower be as fragrant as a wild flower? Some people might just like that. The director of the Ministry of Justice looked at Li Mu's back as he calmly left. Even important officials of the court would rarely be so calm when faced with a case like this. He was almost certain that Li Mu had a motive for being so calm. Zhou Zhong walked out of the court and was about to return to the yamen when a shout came from behind him. Stop! Zhang Chun angrily pointed at Zhou Zhong and said, You've so carelessly captured an official of the court. What can the memories of a mortal woman prove? Zhou Zhong asked calmly, The person who violated the woman looked exactly like Censor Li. Doesn't that prove anything? What does that prove? Zhang Chun snorted coldly and said, If I were to become Assistant Minister Zhou and do evil deeds, would you be blamed for the crime as well? Zhou Zhong asked, Lord Zhang, Are you implying that a Realm 6 expert disguised himself as Censor Li to violate a woman and frame him for it? If Lord Zhang has Realm 6 cultivation and wants to frame me, the Imperial Clan Temple can use this as a reason to imprison me. Before the truth is out, I have nothing to say. Zhang Chun said, transformation techniques don't necessarily require Realm 6 supernatural powers. Transformation talismans and transformation pills can also transform the body and disguise one's appearance. Zhou Zhong asked, would someone use a heaven-grade Fulu and heaven-grade medicinal pill to frame Censor Li? He couldn't afford to offend all of them. He walked to the assistant minister's office and asked Zhou Zhong, Lord Assistant Minister, these people outside all want to visit the prison. Should we reject them? No need. Zhou Zhong waved his hand and said, if they want to visit, let them. However, each visit can only be 2 people at most. They can't stay for more than half an hour. Since the assistant minister had spoken, the director of the Ministry of Justice didn't say anything else. He nodded and said, I'll make the arrangements now. The prison of the Ministry of Justice. In a neat and tidy prison cell. Li Mu stood in the middle of the cell. This was his first time in the Ministry of Justice's prison. Compared to the county and provincial yamen, the prison of the Ministry of Justice was cleaner and tidier. There wasn't any odor in the prison either. Zhou Zhong had arranged a good cell for him. The inside of the cell was spotless. Li Mu had wanted to use his spells to clean it up, but later found that there was no need. He wasn't shackled and his mana wasn't restricted. If he really wanted to leave, the prison of the Ministry of Justice wouldn't be able to hold him. However, he wasn't in a hurry to leave. He wanted to know who was so impatient that they were willing to use Fulu and pills just to frame him. Footsteps came from outside. 2 people appeared outside the cell. One of them was someone Li Mu had seen before. It was the vice director of the Ministry of Revenue, Wei Ting. The other person was someone Li Mu didn't recognize. The person stood outside the cell and took the initiative to introduce himself. Lord Li may not know who I am. Let me introduce myself. I am the director of the Ministry of Rights, Zhu Qi. Zhu Tsong is my son. Li Mu had already noticed that this person looked similar to Zhu Kong. He glanced at the 2 of them and asked, what are you doing here? Zhu Qi said, I was shocked to hear that Lord Li was imprisoned. I wanted to come and take a look. Wei Ting quickly followed and said, Lord Li is a pillar of the country and a favorite of His Majesty. How could he do such a despicable thing? If you need any help, just ask. I won't help you. Wei Ting looked at Li Mu in the cell and laughed happily. His hatred for Li Mu was even greater than Zhu Qi's. Because of Li Mu, he lost his nephew. His only younger brother lost his son. Since then, he was unable to recover from the setback and cut off all contact with him. As for his son Wei Peng, he also suffered an unprecedented blow because of that incident. Since Wei Bin's execution, Wei Peng had never stepped out of the Wei mansion. He hugged a thick copy of the Law of Great Zhou all day long. He read it when he walked, when he ate, and even when he went to the toilet. Even when he slept, he would use the book as a pillow. Wei Ting saw his son's abnormality and his heart ached. He blamed all of this on Li Mu. Wei Ting and Zhu Qi laughed happily. Li Mu looked at them indifferently and said, Scram. Wei Ting's face darkened. He said sternly, don't you know where you are? Don't you know your own situation? What right do you have to be arrogant in front of us? Zhu Qi sneered and said, I'd like to see how long you can be arrogant. At this moment, a prison guard walked in and said to the 2 of them, Lords, it's time to visit the prisoners. The 2 of them looked at Li Mu mockingly again and turned to leave. Li Mu watched the 2 of them leave. He shook his head and said in a low voice, They were not the ones who framed him. Soon, another person walked in from outside. It was an old man with white hair and a face full of wrinkles. As soon as he entered the cell, he looked at Li Mu and said, Lord Li, do you know me? Li Mu glanced at him and asked, Who are you? The old man snorted and said, I'm the deputy of Taichung Temple. 2 months ago, you beat up my grandson 3 times and broke 5 of his ribs. You don't know who I am? Li Mu said, Is the Prime Minister of Taichung Temple senile? The one I hit was your grandson, not you. Why should I know you? The deputy of Taichung Temple pointed at him and said in a trembling voice, You're too arrogant, Li Mu said coldly. It's not the first time I've been so arrogant. Is this the first time you know? The Taichung Temple deputy prime minister had come to mock Li Mu, but he did not expect that not only did Li Mu fail to mock him, but he also angered himself. He pointed at Li Mu, his beard trembling, and said angrily, I'll wait and see if you can still be so arrogant in a few days. After saying this, he angrily stormed off in a huff. Li Mu looked at the back of the deputy of Taichung Temple and shook his head. He said, Not really. The director of the Ministry of Rights, the minister-counselor of the Ministry of Revenue, and the deputy of Taichung Temple were the first to mock him. Obviously, they were not the ones behind the scenes. Li Mu sighed as he stood in the prison cell. Usually he did not care. It was only at times like this that he realized how many enemies he had in Shindu. There were so many that he did not even know who the mastermind was. A voice came from the door again, and Li Mu's gaze followed it. His enemies in Shindu were honest. They seemed to be afraid that they would come too late. After Li Mu was released from prison, they came to the Ministry of Justice one after another to sightsee. The 2 people who came this time were both women, and they weren't young either. One of them had a rather charming figure, and was a young woman around 30 years old. The other person was even older, and didn't even have a hint of charm. The 2 of them did not come close. They only glanced at Li Mu from afar and turned to leave without saying a word. The woman next to the young woman looked at Li Mu with a gaze filled with bone-deep hatred. Li Mu could feel a strong resentment and malice from her. Her disgust for Li Mu was even greater than that of the other 3 combined. Li Mu's eyes flashed. He sensed something and looked at the prison guard. He said, You, come over here. The prison guard at the door ran over quickly and asked anxiously, What do you want? Li Mu glanced at him and asked, Who are the 2 women who came in just now? The prison guard shook his head and said, I don't know. Go and ask. Do you think you? The prison guard was indignant. After exchanging glances with Li Mu, he could not help but tremble and run out quickly. After a while, he ran back in and said, I asked. It's the 4th madam of the Zhou family and the wife of the Minister of Rights. The wife of the Minister of Rights is the daughter of the 4th madam of the Zhou family. Director Zhou, Li Mu said the name softly. His guess was confirmed. There were many people in the divine capital who hated him, but Zhou Ting and his wife were definitely 2 people who hated him to the core. Their only son had died at the hands of Li Mu. Li Mu had always been wary of Zhou Ting, but after Zhou Ting left office, he stayed in the Zhou family and did not leave. Li Mu thought that he was plotting a bigger scheme, but he did not expect that the first to act would be his wife. Since he had found the mastermind, there was no need for him to stay in the Ministry of Justice. He looked at the prison guard again and said, Call Zhou Zhong over. The prison guard did not dare to talk back this time and ran out. Not long after, Zhou Zhong walked slowly into the prison. He looked at Li Mu and asked, Censor Li, do you have anything else to say? Li Mu said indifferently, That woman's matter has nothing to do with me. Someone framed her. Zhou Zhong shook his head and said, Lord Li's one-sided statement cannot be used as evidence. Li Mu asked, Did the person who raped that woman succeed? Zhou Zhong said, That woman from the Su family had her chastity taken last night. Li Mu looked at him and said, If that's the case, then this case cannot be done by me. Zhou Zhong asked, Why? Li Mu's face showed a trace of unnaturalness. He said, Because this official hashtag at yen asterisk. Zhou Zhong took a step forward and tilted his ear. He said, I didn't hear you clearly. Please repeat yourself, Lord Li. Li Mu's forehead darkened. He gritted his teeth and said, Because this official's primordial yang is still there. Zhou Zhong's expression was clearly stunned. Not only him, but even the prison guard was stunned. The 2 of them had never imagined that Li Mu would be able to use such a reason to clear himself of suspicion. But when they thought about it carefully, it seemed that no testimony would be as powerful as this one. This was a special case to begin with. That woman had been raped and her chastity taken. Naturally, that criminal had done something indescribable with her. Li Mu has fallen out of favor. The only reason he can live peacefully in the fairies' capital is because your majesty has his back. He can't live without your majesty. Once your majesty abandons him, the various forces in the fairies' capital will make a move on him. Zhou Yi couldn't tell Mei Wei that she was avoiding Li Mu because she wanted to control her inner demons. She also didn't expect that her actions would cause such serious consequences. Mr. Mei continued, Li Mu can't live without your majesty. Your majesty's actions will disappoint him. With his personality, your majesty might lose him forever. Not only Li Mu couldn't live without her, but she couldn't live without Li Mu either. In this cold court, only Li Mu could bring her some warmth. Zhou Yi had already realized the severity of the situation. She said, "Go to the Ministry of Justice and bring him out immediately." "Forget it, I'll go myself." As soon as he finished speaking, his face turned into Mr. Mei's and he disappeared into thin air. Ministry of Justice. Li Mu walked out of the prison and found a group of people outside. The director of the Ministry of Rights, the minister of the Ministry of Revenue, and the minister of the Taichung Temple hadn't left yet. They were shocked when they saw Zhou Zhong and Li Mu walk out. Why is he out? Why did the Ministry of Justice let him out? Is there any law here? Zhou Zhong walked in front of them and said, "This case has nothing to do with Lord Li." The Ministry of Justice caught him by mistake. The minister of the Taichung Temple said angrily, "That woman has already identified him. You've also searched her soul. This case was obviously done by Li Mu. How can you protect him like this?" Zhou Zhong said calmly, "The Ministry of Justice only cares about evidence when handling cases. Lord Li has evidence to prove that this case has nothing to do with him." The director of the Ministry of Rights said in disbelief, "What evidence?" Zhou Zhong glanced at Li Mu and said, "Lord Li is still a Yuanyang body." As soon as he finished speaking, there was silence in the room. There was no better reason than this to clear him of suspicion in this case. After all, it was impossible for a rapist to still be a virgin after the rape. Perhaps even the mastermind behind the scenes would never have guessed that Li Mu was a fledgling. They couldn't understand why Li Mu was such a handsome man. He could have any woman he wanted. How could he be a virgin? Moreover, the woman beside him was so beautiful. How could he hold himself back? Was he even a man? Seeing everyone's eyes and expressions, Li Mu wished he could sew Zhou Zhong's mouth shut. However, he was no match for Zhou Zhong. His gaze swept across the director of the Ministry of Rights, the minister of the Ministry of Revenue, and the minister of the Taichung Temple. He said, "You guys are very good." The three of them felt a chill run down their spines, straight to their heads. No one expected that Li Mu would be able to escape so quickly. Based on his past temperament, the three of them probably wouldn't have a good life in the future. Looking at Li Mu's back as he left, the director of the Ministry of Rights said with a pale face, "What do we do now?" The minister of the Ministry of Revenue snorted and said, "What are you afraid of? The current Li Mu is no longer the Li Mu of the past. Without his majesty, what is he?" The minister of the Taichung Temple was also relieved. He agreed and said, "That's right. He escaped once, but can he escape a second time or a third time? There are countless people in Luoyang who want him dead. He won't be able to jump around for long." The three of them comforted themselves in such a way, and their anxious hearts finally relaxed. Zhou Zhong glanced at them and asked, "Are the three of you so sure that Li Mu has really fallen out of favor?" The three of them, who had just relaxed, suddenly became worried again. The director of the Ministry of Rights asked, "Sir Zhou, what do you mean by that?" Zhou Zhong shook his head and said, "It's hard to fathom a ruler's heart. Once in favor, once out of favor, once out of favor, and once again back into favor. This has happened a lot in history. You guys are too impatient." When Li Mu walked out of the Ministry of Justice, he was surprised to see Mr. Mei walk in. Mr. May was surprised to see Li Mu. He asked, "Why did you come out?" Li Mu said, "I didn't do it in the first place. It'll be fine as long as I explain it clearly." Mr. May asked, "How did you explain it?" Li Mu waved his hand and said, "That's not important." He looked up at the sky and said, "It's almost lunchtime. Sister May, do you want to go home with me and have a meal before going back to the palace?" Mr. May thought for a moment and said, "His Majesty hasn't eaten yet." "I'll go back and ask His Majesty first," Li Mu said lightly. "It's better not to call His Majesty. There's not enough food at home. There's only enough for 3 people. Mr. May said, "Then I'll go to the market with you to buy some food." Li Mu shook his head and said, "Forget it. I suddenly don't feel like cooking. I'll just go back and eat some steamed buns and salted vegetables with Xiaobai." "Goodbye, Sister May." Mr. May watched Li Mu's figure disappear from her sight. She stood there in a daze, with a confused and helpless expression on her face. After a moment, she withdrew her gaze and slowly walked toward the palace gate. Changle Palace. Zhou Yi looked at Mr. May and asked, "Was I really wrong?" Mr. May's lips moved, but he didn't know what to say. When Her Majesty was young, she focused on cultivation and rarely had contact with others. She was used as a pawn by the Zhou family. After she ascended the throne, she was high above the masses, and no one around her could talk to her. Although she wasn't young, she didn't have much experience and didn't know how to get along with others. The false form divine power could change one's body into a man or a woman, big or small, or a divine bird or a strange beast. It could only be used by see-through Xian stage cultivators who had a profound cultivation base. This was not a simple illusion, but an essential change from the inside to the outside. It was a great magical power beyond the understanding of ordinary people. The Dongxian magical power was extremely difficult to carve fulu and refine elixirs. Therefore, it was extremely rare and ranked in the heavenly realm. The heavenly realm fulu and elixirs were extremely difficult to carve and refine because of the precious materials. Most cultivators would choose to use them for attack or defense. This kind of fulu or elixir that didn't have great power but had special uses was even rarer. The Empress shook her head slightly and said, "It can't be Dongxian. There are not many masters in Dongxian. If they did, I would have sensed it. Someone must have used a false form fulu or elixir. Do you have any suspects?" Li Mu nodded and said, "I suspect it was Zhou Chu's mother. She has been holding a grudge against Zhou Chu for what happened last time. I saw her today in the prison of the Ministry of Justice." Fourth aunt. The Empress sighed softly and said, "She is my family. I can't tell if she has anything to do with this." Old Wang once said that no one could predict everything. There were many limitations in the art of divination. The closer one was to the person, the less accurate the result would be. Most of the time, the result of divination was only a sign or a feeling. It couldn't be confirmed at all. Even though Zhou Ting's wife wasn't related to the Empress by blood, they were still related by blood. Li Mu pondered for a moment before continuing, "In the prison of the Ministry of Justice, the wife of the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights was with her." The Empress counted with her fingers and her face gradually turned cold. She said in a low voice, "It is indeed him." She looked at Li Mu gently and said, "Don't worry. I will get justice for you." Li Mu slept soundly that night. He no longer resented the Empress. What the Empress said later made him feel completely at ease. He even dreamed of the Empress in his dream. It wasn't the Empress who entered the dream, but Li Mu who dreamt of his own accord. If the Empress used the dream-entering technique to invade Li Mu's dream, she would be able to see that there was another her in the dream. Li Mu originally enjoyed this dream very much. In the dream, he and the Empress relied on each other to keep each other warm. She supported Li Mu from behind, and Li Mu cut through all obstacles for her. He swept away all obstacles in the imperial court, subdued the Yao nation, pacified the ghost realm, suppressed the dragon race of the four seas, conquered the barbarians, and unified the countries of the Zhou continent. He also opened up new territory for the Great Zhou, conquered the 10 continents and 3 islands, and completed the unification of the world. He made the 10 continents live in peace and all the countries pay homage to him. Then, the Empress conferred him the title of Empress. When the officials attended court, he often accompanied the Empress. After court, he nestled in her arms with a shy face. No, Li Mu suddenly woke up from his dream. He sat up on the bed and looked around. Thinking about the dream just now, his face was full of shock. The dream just now was simply too scary. In the dream, not only did he have to be a cow or horse for the Empress, he even had to sleep with her. Which normal man would want to marry an Empress? But then again, although her status was high and she was powerful, it wasn't impossible for her to be a wife. In this day and age, which wife could not be unreasonable, admit her mistakes, and protect her husband? She was rich and powerful. Although she wasn't gentle and considerate enough, she was able to put down her pride and identity to take the initiative to admit her mistake instead of being unforgiving and unreasonable. Such a woman was hard to find even if one searched for a lantern. As Li Mu thought about it, he suddenly slapped himself and said angrily, "Bah, scumbag." Lu Hanyan was still in the North County, but he actually had such thoughts about the Empress. He really shouldn't have. After reflecting on himself for a while, Li Mu got up and washed up with Xiao Bai's help. The 2 ghosts had already prepared breakfast. After Li Mu finished eating, he went to the palace and prepared to go to court. At the entrance of the palace, the morning court had not started yet. The officials were already waiting outside the palace. In the line of officials, many people were discussing what happened yesterday. Li Mu was arrested and sent to the Ministry of Justice. Although they did not know why he was released later, the Empress did not interfere from beginning to end. What did this mean? It meant that Li Mu's fall from grace was very likely true. A few days ago, when the news of Li Mu's fall from grace spread like wildfire, many of them had been observing the situation from afar. After all, the Empress's heart was unpredictable. No one knew whether Li Mu's fall from grace was true or false. If the news was wrong, they would be impulsively attacking Li Mu and angering the Empress. Wouldn't they be courting death? Everyone was waiting for the first person to test the waters. They did not expect that someone would be so impatient. It had only been a few days, but they could not wait to attack Li Mu. This gave them a chance to verify it. Although Li Mu was released from the Ministry of Justice yesterday, he seemed to have used some method to prove his innocence. The Empress did not say anything about what had happened to him. This had already sent out a strong signal to everyone. Chapter 297. The imperial court had been peaceful for so long, and the sudden appearance of a disruptor was something that no one wanted to see. Perhaps Li Mu had no selfish motives, but it was precisely because of this that he was an eyesore. Without him, whether it was the old or new parties or the other officials, their days would be much more comfortable. Before the imperial court, no discussion is allowed. While the officials were whispering, a stern voice came from outside the group of officials, interrupting their whispers. Everyone looked over and saw Li Mu wandering outside the group, his sharp gaze sweeping over the crowd. Li Mu was the imperial censor of the imperial court. His main responsibility was to inspect the officials' manners during the imperial court and correct their improper behavior. The emperor used to use him as a personal guard, but now that Li Mu had fallen out of favor, he was only the imperial censor of the imperial court. He had the right to reprimand the officials before the imperial court. The crowd stopped talking, but they sneered in their hearts. The days when he could strut around like this were numbered. Li Mu walked to a certain place and looked at an official. The physician of the Board of Rights, Zhu Qi, also looked at Li Mu, his heart inexplicably weak. Li Mu coldly asked, "What are you looking at?" This was not the past, when the silver law of guilt had been abolished. Zhu Qi did not believe that if he looked at Li Mu one more time, Li Mu would dare to beat him like he had beaten his son in front of the officials. If he really dared to do so, he would not be far from death. Zhu Qi coldly snorted and asked, "What, can't I look at you?" Li Mu shrugged and said, "Of course you can." Zhu Qi looked at him, his gaze even more unbridled, a trace of mockery in his contempt. Li Mu's tone changed and he said, "You can look at me, but you are not wearing your official hat properly. According to the law, you will be caned 10 times and your salary will be deducted for half a month. Men, drag the physician of the Board of Rights to the side, seal his cultivation, and punish him with 10 canes as a warning to others." Zhu Qi's expression changed as he shouted, "How can there be such a law?" Li Mu stretched out his hand and a copy of the Great Zhou Laws appeared in his hand. He flipped to a page and pointed it out to Zhu Qi, saying, "Look for yourself." The third article of the 35th volume of the Great Zhou Laws states that officials must tidy up their attire before attending court. Those who are disheveled will be regarded as disrespectful in front of the monarch. Their salary will be deducted for half a month and they will be caned 10 times. Have I said anything wrong? Zhu Qi stared blankly at this clause. It was written in black and white. Unless Li Mu had the guts to change the laws of Great Zhou, what he said was true. Tampering with the laws of Great Zhou was a capital offense. There was no way he would fabricate this just to give him 10 beatings. Li Mu shook his head and said, "This is the rule set by the previous emperor. You didn't follow it when it came to His Majesty. It is clear that you have no respect for His Majesty. If I don't teach you a lesson today, I'm afraid you won't respect His Majesty in the future." He looked at the 2 guards in front of the palace and said, "What are you waiting for? Start the punishment." The 2 guards looked at each other and didn't move. They hadn't been on duty for long and hadn't heard of this rule. Mr. May walked over from afar and looked at the 2 lightly. He asked, "Didn't you hear what Sir Li said? Disrespectful in front of the palace was a serious offense in the previous emperor's time. 10 beatings is already a light punishment. What are you waiting for?" Seeing that Commander May had spoken, the 2 didn't dare to hesitate. They walked up to Zhu Qi and said, "Sir, please." Zhu Qi's expression was stiff and his throat moved. He walked with difficulty and left with the 2 guards. Li Mu used the law to suppress him. He didn't even have a chance to resist. He swore in his heart that when he returned, he would take a good look at the laws of Great Zhou. What kind of bullsh*t rule was this? Zhu Qi was taken away to receive his punishment. The officials beside him were very nervous. Some of them even used their mana to adjust their official hats. Some of the officials who had been on the court during the previous emperor's time even remembered the rules of the previous emperor's time. Disrespectful in front of the palace was a crime that existed during the previous emperor's time. Many officials had been punished because of this. After the empress succeeded the throne, she didn't care about this anymore. When the officials went to court, they also became casual. Most importantly, they didn't have to worry about it anymore. Who would have thought that Li Mu would bring this up again today? He brought out all the provisions of the law. No one could say that he was wrong unless the officials all agreed to abolish this law. But that was a matter for the future. Li Mu didn't care about the frightened officials and continued to patrol outside. As he walked, his footsteps stopped again. He stood in front of Wei Teng, the minister-counselor of the Ministry of Revenue. Wei Teng's forehead was covered in cold sweat. He finally understood what Li Mu meant when he said those last words to the 3 of them yesterday. Revenge. This was undisguised revenge. Li Mu stood in front of Wei Teng. At first glance, he didn't find anything strange. At second glance, he also didn't find anything strange. So he began to look carefully, up and down, front and back, left and right. At this moment, Wei Teng really wanted to curse. When Li Mu walked past the other officials, he only glanced at them. When he came to Wei Teng, he had already looked at them for the time it took to brew a cup of tea.